Hello everyone and welcome. This is Harry Fictional Hub speaking. We have handpicked a wonderful story for today. Harry awakened the Omega Aura during the sorting and the hat bowed to its new king. New videos drop regularly, so subscribe and hit the bell to stay updated. And don't forget to like if you enjoy the story. Shall we begin? Here goes. Chapter 1, The Crown Unbidden. The Great Hall of Hogwarts hummed with anticipation. Hundreds of candles hovered in the enchanted ceiling, mimicking the starry night sky outside as Professor McGonagall placed an ancient, frayed wizard's hat upon a three-legged stool. Harry Potter stood among the cluster of first years, his palms damp with sweat, heart racing beneath his two large robes. "When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted," Professor McGonagall announced, unfurling a long scroll of parchment. Harry barely heard the names being called. The dizzying mixture of excitement and terror that had followed him from platform 9 3/4 intensified with each passing second. Ron Weasley fidgeted nervously beside him, while across the huddle of first years, the bushy-haired girl they'd met on the train, Hermione Granger, whispered furiously about spells she'd memorized. "Potter, Harry," McGonagall called at last. The great hall fell silent, then erupted in whispers. "Did she say Potter? The Harry Potter?" Harry stepped forward, painfully aware of hundreds of eyes tracking his movement. He sat on the stool, gripping its edges as McGonagall lowered the sorting hat onto his head. The brim fell over his eyes, plunging him into darkness. Said a small voice in his ear. "Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind, either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you?" Harry gripped the stool tighter. "Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin, the small voice replied. "Are you sure? You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. Not Slytherin. Please." "Well, if you're sure, better be." The hat stopped mid-pronouncement. Harry felt a sudden warmth spreading from his chest outward, flowing through his veins like liquid sunlight. The sensation was foreign yet somehow familiar, as if awakening something that had always been there, dormant beneath his skin. "What's this?" the hat whispered, voice changing from casual curiosity to reverent awe. "Oh my, after all these centuries." The great hall remained in expectant silence, waiting for the hat's pronouncement. But instead of calling out a house name, the hat began to tremble atop Harry's head. "It cannot be," the hat whispered, so softly that only Harry could hear. "The Omega Aura, not seen since the Founder's time." The warmth intensified, and Harry felt a peculiar surge of energy crackling beneath his skin. The darkness behind his closed eyelids suddenly blazed with golden light. "I bow to thee, magical sovereign," the hat proclaimed, its voice no longer a whisper but a resonant declaration that echoed throughout the hall. "Gryffindor, but more than that. I recognize the Omega Aura, the crown magical." Harry felt the hat perform an actual bow while still perched on his head, bending forward in a gesture of fealty. A collective gasp swept through the great hall as a shimmering aura of gold and crimson erupted around Harry's body, cascading outward in pulsating waves. The candles floating above flared in response, their flames shifting to match the golden hue of Harry's aura. Professor McGonagall staggered backward, her normally composed expression giving way to naked shock. At the teacher's table, Dumbledore rose to his feet, blue eyes widening behind half-moon spectacles. As McGonagall lifted the hat from Harry's head with trembling hands, the aura remained, enveloping him in its luminous embrace. Harry stood, feeling strangely calm despite the extraordinary circumstances. The magic flowing through him felt right somehow, like returning to a home he'd never known he had. The Gryffindor table erupted in thunderous applause, led by the Weasley twins who were shouting, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" But their celebration carried an undercurrent of uncertainty, eyes wide with wonder and confusion at the supernatural display. Harry made his way to the Gryffindor table on legs that felt oddly steady. The golden aura gradually faded as he walked, diminishing to a subtle glow before disappearing entirely by the time he took his seat. But something had fundamentally changed. He could feel it in the way magic now hummed beneath his skin, responsive and alive. What was that? Whispered a tall, red-headed prefect who introduced himself as Percy Weasley, Ron's older brother. I don't know, Harry replied honestly. The crown magical, murmured an older girl further down the table, her voice hushed with reverence. My grandmother used to tell stories, but they were just legends. Across the hall, Harry noticed Dumbledore engaged in urgent, whispered conversation with the other professors. Professor McGonagall had recovered her composure enough to continue the sorting, though her voice retained a slight tremor. When Ron's turn came, the hat barely touched his head before shouting, Gryffindor. The redhead collapsed into the seat beside Harry, his face pale beneath his freckles. Bloody hell, Harry, he whispered. What happened up there? I wish I knew, Harry replied, still feeling the residual warmth of the aura flowing through him. The hat said something about an Omega aura. Omega aura? Ron's eyes widened. Dad mentioned that once. Said it was old magic, the kind they don't teach anymore. The kind that existed before the Ministry started regulating things. Harry glanced up at the staff table again. Dumbledore's gaze met his, the headmaster's expression unreadable behind his long silver beard. Beside him sat a sallow-faced man with a hooked nose and greasy black hair, staring at Harry with an intensity that made his newly awakened magic prickle in warning. Who's that teacher talking to Professor Quirrell? Harry asked, nodding toward the hook-nosed professor. That's Snape, head of Slytherin House, said Percy. Teaches potions, but everyone knows he's after Quirrell's job. Knows a lot about the dark arts, Snape does. The sorting concluded with Zabini, Blaise, becoming a Slytherin. Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away, her eyes darting back to Harry one last time before exiting. Dumbledore rose to his feet, beaming at the students as if nothing unusual had occurred. Welcome, he said. Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are, nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak. Thank you. Food appeared on the golden plates, drawing gasps of delight from the first years. Harry found himself suddenly ravenous, as if the manifestation of the aura had depleted his energy. He filled his plate with everything within reach, noting with curiosity that the food tasted more vibrant than anything he'd experienced before, flavors sharper, textures more defined. Is he, a bit mad? Harry asked Percy, nodding toward Dumbledore. Mad? He's a genius. Best wizard in the world. But yes, a bit mad, Percy replied, then lowered his voice. Harry, about what happened during your sorting. But whatever Percy intended to say was interrupted by the arrival of the Gryffindor house ghost, Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, who materialized through the table between them. Harry was surprised to find he could sense the ghost's presence even before looking up, a cool, ethereal sensation against his newly awakened magical awareness. The ghost stared at Harry with astonishment. My word, he exclaimed, floating closer. It's true, then. I felt the surge of power from the beyond. You know what happened? Harry asked eagerly. Not precisely, young Potter, but I recognize the signs. The Omega aura is ancient magic, predating even Hogwarts itself. The founders themselves spoke of it with reverence. The ghost bowed his partially severed head, which wobbled precariously. If it has chosen you, then dark times must lie ahead. Dark times? Ron questioned through a mouthful of potatoes. Magic of this magnitude doesn't awaken without cause, Sir Nicholas replied gravely. The last time the Omega aura appeared, Hogwarts itself was in peril. A chill ran down Harry's spine despite the warmth still flowing through his veins. Across the hall, he noticed students from other tables stealing glances at him, whispers passing between them like ripples on water. At the Slytherin table, a pale, pointed-faced boy was watching him with calculated interest. "That's Draco Malfoy," Ron muttered, following Harry's gaze. "Dad says his family was right in with you-know-who. First to come back to our side when he disappeared, claiming they'd been bewitched." As if hearing his name, Malfoy's eyes locked with Harry's. Instead of the expected hostility, Harry saw something more complex: assessment, calculation, and a flicker of what might have been respect. The feast progressed, conversation flowing around Harry in waves. He noticed that older students kept finding reasons to move closer to him, introducing themselves with curious glances. By dessert, he found himself at the center of a small crowd, all pretending casual interest while peppering him with questions about his childhood. "So you were raised by Muggles?" asked a second-year girl named Katie Bell. "Did you ever show signs of, special magic?" Harry shook his head. "Nothing like this. Just normal accidental magic, I think. Made glass disappear once. Grew my hair back overnight after a terrible haircut." "Fascinating," said an older boy. "The Omega aura typically builds over time, not emerges suddenly." "How do you know about it?" Harry asked. The boy hesitated. "My family has an extensive magical library. The Omega aura appears in some of the oldest texts, usually as legend rather than documented fact." As the feast concluded, Dumbledore rose again to make announcements about forbidden forests and third-floor corridors. Harry found his attention strangely divided, part of him listening to the headmaster's words while another part sensed the magical currents flowing through the Great Hall. He could almost see the ancient protective enchantments woven into the very stones of Hogwarts, humming with power. When the school song concluded in a chaotic cacophony led by the Weasley twins, Dumbledore's eyes sought Harry's across the hall. There was something in that gaze, concern mingled with fascination, that suggested the headmaster knew more about the Omega aura than he was letting on. "First years, follow me," Percy called, rising from the table. "I'll show you to Gryffindor Tower." Harry stood, feeling oddly energized despite the long day. As they prepared to leave the hall, Professor McGonagall approached, her face composed once more into its stern mask. "Mr. Potter," she said quietly. "The headmaster would like to see you in his office before you retire for the evening. Mr. Weasley, please show the other first years to the dormitory. I will escort Mr. Potter personally once his meeting concludes." Ron shot Harry a concerned look. "I'll save you a bed, mate," he promised. Harry nodded gratefully, then followed Professor McGonagall out of the Great Hall. He could feel the stares of the remaining students tracking his movement. "Professor," he ventured as they climbed the marble staircase, "what is the Omega aura?" McGonagall's pace faltered slightly. "That is not for me to explain, Potter. The headmaster will address your questions." "Am I in trouble?" A rare smile briefly softened her features. "No, Potter. Extraordinary, yes, but not in trouble." She paused. "What you must understand is that what happened tonight hasn't occurred in centuries. The magical community will react, strongly. Headmaster Dumbledore wishes to prepare you." They walked in silence through the labyrinthine corridors of Hogwarts. Harry found, to his surprise, that he could sense the direction of their movement, as if the castle's magical blueprint had imprinted itself on his mind. They stopped before an imposing stone gargoyle. "Sherbet lemon," McGonagall pronounced clearly. The gargoyle sprang aside, revealing a spiral staircase that moved upward like an escalator. McGonagall gestured for Harry to step onto it. "The headmaster awaits you above. I'll return in 1 hour to escort you to Gryffindor Tower." Harry rode the moving staircase upward, his heart pounding against his ribs. At the top, he found a gleaming oak door with a brass knocker. Before he could knock, a voice called from within. "Enter, Harry." The office beyond was extraordinary, circular and beautiful, filled with strange silver instruments that emitted puffs of smoke and soft whirring sounds. Portraits of elderly witches and wizards lined the walls, many pretending to sleep while stealing glances at him. And behind a massive claw-footed desk sat Albus Dumbledore, his silver beard gleaming in the candlelight. "Good evening, Harry," Dumbledore said kindly. "Please, take a seat. I imagine you have questions." Harry sat in the offered chair, suddenly aware of how small he felt in this grand office. "Sir, what happened during the sorting?" The hat said something about an Omega aura. "Indeed." Dumbledore steepled his long fingers. "What occurred tonight was the awakening of a magical potential so rare it has passed into legend. The Omega aura represents magic in its purest form, unfiltered, unbound by conventional limitations." "But why me?" Harry asked, the question that had plagued him since learning he was a wizard intensifying tenfold. Dumbledore's blue eyes studied him intently. "That, Harry, is the question I had hoped to explore gradually over your years at Hogwarts. I believed you were marked by Voldemort in ways beyond the physical, but this manifestation suggests something far more profound." A soft trill drew Harry's attention to a magnificent scarlet bird perched near the desk, regarding him with intelligent eyes. "Fawkes," Dumbledore explained, "my phoenix. He seems quite interested in you." As if in response, Fawkes spread his magnificent wings and glided to land on the arm of Harry's chair. The phoenix leaned forward, fixing Harry with a penetrating stare before emitting a single, pure note that resonated with the magic flowing through Harry's veins. "Extraordinary," Dumbledore murmured. "Fawkes rarely shows such immediate interest in visitors." The phoenix gently brushed its head against Harry's arm, and the contact sent a warm pulse through his awakened magic. Harry instinctively reached out to stroke the bird's brilliant plumage, feeling an immediate connection. "Sir, the ghost, Sir Nicholas, said the Omega aura only appears when there's danger." Dumbledore nodded gravely. "Magic of this magnitude does not manifest without cause. History tells us that the Omega aura emerges in times of great magical imbalance, when the very foundations of our world face threats beyond ordinary measure." "Because of Voldemort?" Harry asked, the name feeling strange on his tongue after hearing everyone else call him you-know-who. "Perhaps," Dumbledore replied. "Though I fear the implications may be more complex. The Omega aura is older than any Dark Lord, older even than Hogwarts itself. It represents magic's own consciousness, in a sense, its will to preserve balance." Harry tried to process this information, feeling both overwhelmed and strangely calm. "What does it mean for me? What am I supposed to do?" "For now, Harry, you must learn. Learn magic as your classmates do, but remain attentive to the unique gifts the aura may bestow." Dumbledore leaned forward. "I will arrange special sessions to help you understand and control these abilities. Professor McGonagall has agreed to assist, as has Professor Flitwick, who has studied ancient magical forms. Will everyone know about this? News of tonight's events will spread quickly, I'm afraid. By morning, many students will have written home. Within days, the wider magical community will know that the Omega aura has reawakened." Dumbledore's expression grew serious. "This will bring attention, not all of it welcome. Some will seek to use you, others to test you, and some may fear what your emergence represents." Harry swallowed hard. "Just when I thought being the boy who lived was complicated enough." A smile crinkled Dumbledore's eyes. "Indeed. But remember, Harry, at Hogwarts, you will find those who value you for yourself, not for the powers you possess or the scars you bear." The phoenix, still perched beside Harry, emitted another musical note that somehow felt reassuring. "There is much more to discuss," Dumbledore continued, "but it grows late, and your first day of classes awaits tomorrow. Professor McGonagall should be returning shortly to escort you to Gryffindor Tower." Harry stood, feeling both relieved and burdened by their conversation. "Thank you, Professor." "One more thing, Harry," Dumbledore said as Harry reached the door. "The Sorting Hat still placed you in Gryffindor for a reason. The Omega aura may set you apart, but your choices, your heart, define who you truly are. Remember that in the days ahead." Harry nodded, those words settling deep within him as he descended the spiral staircase to where Professor McGonagall waited. The journey to Gryffindor Tower passed in relative silence, Harry's mind too full for conversation. When they reached a portrait of a fat lady in a pink silk dress, McGonagall provided the password, Caput Draconis, and gave Harry's shoulder a rare, supportive squeeze. "It won't be easy, Potter," she said quietly. "But Gryffindor has produced extraordinary wizards before. We will help you navigate this path." The Gryffindor common room was mostly empty when Harry entered, the late hour having driven most students to bed. But beside the dying fire sat Ron, determinedly fighting sleep as he waited for his new friend's return. "Harry!" Ron exclaimed, jolting upright. "What happened? Did Dumbledore explain things?" Harry sank into an armchair beside him, grateful for the familiar presence. "Sort of. It's complicated, Ron. This Omega Aura thing, it's really rare. Hasn't happened in centuries rare." "Blimey," Ron whispered. "So you're not just famous for surviving you-know-who anymore. You're famous for, whatever this is too." Harry groaned, dropping his head into his hands. "Exactly what I needed, more reasons for people to stare." "At least it's for something you actually did this time," Ron offered. "Not just for something that happened when you were a baby." Harry looked up, surprised by the insight. "I hadn't thought of it that way. So what can you do now? Can you shoot lightning from your fingers? Transfigure people into toads? Beat a dragon in arm wrestling?" Despite himself, Harry laughed. "Nothing like that. I don't think it works that way. It's more like, I can feel the magic around me now. Like the castle has its own heartbeat, and somehow I can sense it." "Wicked," Ron breathed. "Think it'll help with exams?" "Doubtful. Dumbledore says I still need to learn magic like everyone else." Harry stifled a yawn. "We should probably get some sleep. Where's our dormitory?" Ron led the way up a spiral staircase to a room marked, First Years. Inside, 3 four-poster beds were already occupied by their snoring roommates, Seamus Finnegan, Dean Thomas, and Neville Longbottom. Their trunks had been brought up and placed at the foot of their beds. Harry changed into his pajamas and slipped beneath the covers, the events of the day catching up with him in a wave of exhaustion. Just before sleep claimed him, he noticed something peculiar. In the darkness, his skin held the faintest golden glow, pulsing gently in rhythm with his heartbeat. Morning arrived with a flurry of whispers. Harry opened his eyes to find his roommates huddled together, stealing glances at him while engaged in urgent conversation. They scattered awkwardly when they realized he was awake. "Morning, Harry," Neville squeaked, his round face flushing crimson. "Good morning," Harry replied, sitting up. The golden glow that had surrounded him the night before had vanished, but he could still feel magic humming beneath his skin. "Is it true?" Seamus blurted out, unable to contain his curiosity. "About what happened at the sorting?" "My cousin in Hufflepuff said the hat actually bowed to you." Harry ran a hand through his eternally messy hair. "It's complicated. They're calling you the magical sovereign," Dean Thomas said, eyes wide. "Someone overheard the hat. The older students are saying it's some kind of ancient power that hasn't been seen since the founder's time." "Great," Harry muttered, climbing out of bed and reaching for his robes. "Just what I needed." "Is it true you met with Dumbledore last night?" Neville asked timidly. "Yeah, but he mostly just told me not to worry and focus on my studies." It wasn't entirely untrue, though it significantly simplified the conversation. Ron, sensing Harry's discomfort, intervened. "Come on, let's get breakfast. I'm starving, and we need to get our class schedules." The other boys seemed disappointed at the lack of dramatic revelations but didn't press further. Harry shot Ron a grateful look as they headed down to the common room together. The whispers and stares followed them through the portrait hole and down 7 flights of moving staircases. Students who had been chatting animatedly fell silent as Harry passed, only to erupt in furious whispers in his wake. Portraits along the corridors abandoned their usual activities to track his progress, some even moving through adjacent frames to follow him. "It's going to be a long day," Harry murmured. "Look on the bright side," Ron offered. "At least they're talking about something you actually did, not just your scar." "I didn't actually do anything though," Harry protested. "It just happened." "Still better than being famous for something you can't even remember." The Great Hall was already bustling when they arrived. As Harry entered, a momentary hush fell over the tables before conversation resumed at twice the volume. He kept his eyes fixed firmly ahead as he made his way to the Gryffindor table, sliding into a seat beside Hermione Granger, who was already buried in Hogwarts, a history. She looked up as he sat down. "I've been researching all morning," she announced without preamble. "There's very little about the Omega Aura in the standard texts, but I found a reference in ancient magical manifestations that calls it the crown of magical sovereignty, bestowed upon those destined to reshape the foundations of wizardry." Her eyes were bright with academic excitement. "It's fascinating, really. The text suggests the aura grants enhanced magical perception and natural affinity for spellwork, particularly in areas of protection and, breathe, Hermione," Ron interrupted, loading his plate with eggs and sausages. "He only just woke up." Hermione flushed slightly. "Sorry. It's just, this is historical. Magical theorists have debated the existence of the Omega Aura for centuries." "Well, now they can stop debating," Harry said, reaching for the toast. "Lucky me." Fred and George Weasley dropped into seats across from them, identical grins spreading across their freckled faces. "All hail the magical sovereign," Fred proclaimed in a mock ceremonial voice, giving an exaggerated bow. "Shall we fetch you a crown, Your Majesty?" George added, mimicking his brother's bow. Harry groaned. "Please don't." "Only teasing, Harry," Fred assured him. "Though you might want to prepare yourself. The owls should be arriving any minute, and I'd bet my last galleon that half the wizarding world already knows about last night." As if summoned by his words, a rush of wings announced the arrival of the morning mail. Hundreds of owls streamed into the Great Hall, circling the tables in search of their recipients. To Harry's alarm, dozens of them seemed to be heading directly for him. "Duck and cover," George advised as the first envelope landed in Harry's porridge. Within seconds, Harry's place at the table disappeared beneath a mountain of letters, packages, and at least one howler that began smoking ominously. Hedwig arrived as well, looking distinctly ruffled as she fought her way through the owl traffic to deliver a letter from Hagrid. "Blimey," Ron breathed, staring at the pile. "I think you've got more mail than everyone else combined." Professor McGonagall appeared at Harry's shoulder, surveying the chaos with thin-lipped disapproval. With a wave of her wand, she vanished the entire pile. "The school will screen your correspondence, Potter," she informed him. "Anything personal or important will be forwarded to you after appropriate checks." The headmaster anticipated this, enthusiasm. "Thank you, Professor," Harry said, genuinely relieved. She handed him his class schedule, then hesitated. "The headmaster asked me to remind you that you have an additional session this evening after dinner. My office, 7 o'clock sharp." She lowered her voice. "We'll begin work on understanding your unique situation." As she moved along the table distributing schedules, the Weasley twins leaned forward conspirationally. "Special lessons already?" Fred whispered. "Must be some perk, being magical royalty," George added with a wink. "It's not like that," Harry protested. "Dumbledore just wants to help me understand what's happening." "Well, whatever it is," Fred said, glancing around the hall, "you've certainly made an impression. Look at the Slytherins." Harry followed his gaze to the table across the hall, where the students in green and silver robes were engaged in intense discussion, many casting calculating glances in his direction. The pale-faced boy from the previous night, Draco Malfoy, was at the center of a huddle, speaking animatedly while occasionally glancing Harry's way. "Planning something, that lot," Ron muttered darkly. Or reconsidering their strategy, George suggested. Pureblood families like the Malfoys put enormous stock in magical power and ancient lineages. Whatever this Omega Aura is, it's clearly old magic, the kind they respect despite themselves. Harry contemplated this as he examined his schedule. We've got Transfiguration first, then Herbology with the Hufflepuffs. Better get moving then, Hermione said, gathering her books. Professor McGonagall doesn't seem the type to tolerate tardiness, even from the magical sovereign. Harry winced at the title but followed her lead, gathering his own supplies. As they navigated the corridors toward the Transfiguration classroom, he became aware of something peculiar. The castle seemed to be responding to him. Staircases that were notorious for changing direction mid-climb remained steady beneath his feet. Doors that others struggled to open swung wide at his lightest touch. Are you doing that? Ron whispered after a particularly ornery door practically leapt open before Harry could even reach for the handle. Not intentionally, Harry replied, equally mystified. They reached the Transfiguration classroom just as the bell rang. Professor McGonagall stood at the front, her stern gaze sweeping over the incoming students. As Harry took his seat, he noticed her eyes lingering on him with an unreadable expression. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she began after taking roll call. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned. She demonstrated by transforming her desk into a pig and back again, drawing impressed gasps from the class. After taking detailed notes on the theory behind Transfiguration, they were each given a match and instructed to turn it into a needle. Harry stared at his match, recalling the incantation and wand movement McGonagall had demonstrated. As he raised his wand, he felt something unexpected, the magic within him reaching out, connecting with the match in a way that made its essential nature clear to him. He could sense the potential for change within the simple wooden object, as if the needle state existed simultaneously with its current form. Aecus transformo, he whispered, moving his wand in a precise motion. The match didn't just change, it transformed with a flash of golden light that momentarily illuminated the classroom. Where the match had been now sat not just a needle, but an intricately carved silver pin with a miniature lion's head at its eye. A hush fell over the classroom. Professor McGonagall swept over to his desk, her eyebrows nearly disappearing into her hairline. Mr. Potter, she said, carefully lifting the silver pin. This is, most irregular. I'm sorry, Professor, Harry said automatically. I was trying to follow the instructions. No need to apologize. This is extraordinary work, beyond OWL level, in fact. She examined the pin more closely. The transfiguration is complete down to the molecular level, and you've added decorative elements without conscious intent. Most interesting. She returned the pin to his desk. 5 points to Gryffindor for exceptional spell work. Please attempt the exercise again, Mr. Potter, this time focusing strictly on the basic needle transformation. Harry nodded, accepting a new match from her. Conscious of the stares from his classmates, he tried to restrain the surging magic he could feel responding to his intent. His second attempt produced a perfect, plain needle, though those sitting closest to him noticed the brief golden shimmer that accompanied the transformation. By the end of class, only Hermione had also succeeded in transforming her match, though her needle lacked the silvery finish of Harry's. She approached him as they packed up their books. That was incredible magic, she said, a mixture of admiration and academic interest in her voice. The way your wand lit up with that golden glow, I've never read about anything like it. I didn't do it on purpose, Harry admitted quietly. It's like the magic just knew what I wanted. That's consistent with what I read about the Omega Aura, she replied thoughtfully. The text suggested it creates an intuitive connection to magical forces. Mr. Potter, a moment please, Professor McGonagall called as students began filing out. Harry approached her desk, wondering if he was in trouble despite her earlier praise. What you experienced today, she said once the classroom had emptied, is only the beginning. Your innate magic is responding to your intent in ways that circumvent normal magical constraints. Her expression softened slightly. This evening's session will address techniques to moderate your output. In the meantime, I suggest you practice restraint in your spellcasting. Focus on performing magic exactly as instructed, no more and no less. Yes, Professor. I'll try. I have no doubt you will succeed, Potter. A rare smile briefly crossed her face. Your mother had exceptional control over her magic as well, though in a different manner. The mention of his mother caught Harry by surprise. You knew my mother well. She was one of my most gifted students, McGonagall replied, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. Lily Evans had a natural affinity for Transfiguration that made her work seem almost effortless. Your situation is different, of course, but I suspect you've inherited her intuitive understanding of magical principles. Harry absorbed this unexpected connection to his past. Thank you for telling me, Professor. She nodded briskly, professional demeanor returning. Off you go then. Professor Sprout doesn't appreciate tardiness to herbology. The rest of the morning passed in a similar pattern. In herbology, the plants seemed to respond to Harry's presence, leaning subtly toward him as he moved through the greenhouse. Professor Sprout noticed but made no comment beyond a thoughtful and an adjustment to the day's lesson that kept Harry working with the more temperamental specimens. By lunchtime, Harry was mentally exhausted from the effort of restraining his magic to perform spells at a first-year level. The Omega Aura seemed to have its own ideas about how magic should flow, pushing toward more complete, complex results than the simple exercises they practiced. You look done in, Ron commented as they sat down to lunch. It's harder to hold back than to let go, Harry admitted, helping himself to shepherd's pie. Like trying to only partially open a tap that wants to flow fully. Better get used to it, Fred advised, dropping into a seat beside them. First-year spells are meant to build foundations. If you skip ahead because of this aura business, you might miss important principles. Speaking of which, George added, sitting opposite, you've got quite the welcome committee forming. Harry followed his gaze to the entrance of the Great Hall, where a group of older students from various houses had gathered, watching him with barely concealed interest. The tall Ravenclaw is Robert Hilliard, sixth-year prefect, Fred identified. Brilliant but rigid. Beside him is Cedric Diggory from Hufflepuff, decent bloke, excellent seeker. The Slytherin is Adrian Pusey, third year with old family connections. Why are they watching me? Politics, Harry, George explained. The Omega Aura isn't just some cool magical talent, it's a symbol with historical significance. Those students represent families with traditional interests in magical governance. I'm 11, Harry protested. I don't know anything about magical governance. Which makes you the perfect figurehead, Fred replied. Young, impressionable, wielding ancient power without political baggage. Great, Harry muttered, appetite diminishing. Just what I needed. Don't worry too much, George advised. Dumbledore won't let them pressure you. And you've got the Weasley clan watching your back. Though if you do become Minister of Magic someday, remember who your first supporters were, Fred added with a wink. After lunch came Harry's first defense against the dark arts class with the stuttering Professor Quirrell. Harry found himself immediately on edge upon entering the classroom, a strange pressure building behind his scar that intensified whenever Quirrell turned his back. More peculiarly, the Omega Aura seemed to stir defensively within him, a subtle golden shimmer occasionally visible around his hands when the professor drew near. P.P. Potter, Quirrell called during roll, his eyes darting nervously to Harry's forehead before quickly looking away. Our new celebrity. Throughout the lecture on basic defensive theory, Harry found himself distracted by the uncomfortable sensation in his scar and the way his awakened magic reacted to Quirrell's presence. When they practiced the simple spark charm, Vermilius, Harry's wand produced not just sparks but a fountain of golden flames that briefly formed the shape of a shield before dissipating. Extraordinary magical affinity, Quirrell commented, though he kept his distance from Harry's desk. F5 points to G. Gryffindor. As class ended, Harry was surprised when Quirrell called him to stay behind. The professor waited until the last student had left before speaking, his stutter mysteriously less pronounced. "The Omega Aura," he said, keeping a careful distance. "Fascinating manifestation. Historical accounts suggest its bearers possessed unique defenses against dark magic." Professor Dumbledore mentioned something similar, Harry replied cautiously, noticing how the pressure in his scar increased when Quirrell focused his complete attention on him. "The headmaster has always had a particular interest in ancient magics." Quirrell's eyes narrowed slightly. "You would do well to remember, Potter, that power draws attention from all quarters. Not everyone will approach you with benevolent intentions." "Are you warning me, Professor?" A strange smile flickered across Quirrell's face. "Merely offering practical advice for defense against the dark arts. After all, you now represent something certain elements of our society will find threatening." Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty classroom. "Thank you for the advice, sir." Quirrell nodded, turning away. "You may go, Potter. I believe you have charms next. Professor Flitwick will be most eager to see how your talents manifest in his subject." Harry hurried from the room, the uncomfortable pressure in his scar fading with each step away from Quirrell. He found Ron waiting in the corridor, looking concerned. "What was that about?" "Not sure," Harry replied truthfully. "But something about him feels off. Did you notice anything strange during class? Besides your golden fireworks?" "Not really. Though his classroom smells terrible. Garlic everywhere." As they headed toward the charms classroom, Harry described the pressure in his scar and the way his magic had reacted defensively. "Sounds like the Omega Aura doesn't like him," Ron suggested. "Maybe it can sense things we can't." "Maybe," Harry agreed, wondering if he should mention it during his special session with McGonagall that evening. Charms class proved similarly eventful. Professor Flitwick, a tiny wizard who had to stand on a pile of books to see over his desk, squeaked and toppled from his perch when he reached Harry's name during roll call. Once recovered, he regarded Harry with scholarly fascination throughout the lesson on basic wand movements and magical theory. When they practiced the wand-lighting charm, Lumos, Harry's wand produced a sphere of golden light that illuminated the entire classroom, causing several students to shield their eyes. "Extraordinary control of magical luminance," Flitwick exclaimed, clapping his small hands in delight. "Though perhaps a bit too much power for practical applications. Try imagining a dimmer switch, Mr. Potter. Visualization is key to moderating output." Harry found the visualization technique surprisingly effective. By imagining his magic flowing through a constricted channel, he managed to produce a more standard Lumos on his second attempt, though the light retained a distinctive golden hue. "Well done." Flitwick beamed. 5 points to Gryffindor for adaptive magical technique. As classes ended for the day, Harry and Ron made their way back to Gryffindor Tower, discussing the day's events. "So basically, you're too magical for basic spells," Ron summarized, shaking his head in amazement. "It's not like that," Harry protested. "I'm not doing it on purpose." "Still brilliant," Ron insisted. "Just wait until we get to flying lessons. If the castle responds to you, imagine what a broomstick might do." The thought hadn't occurred to Harry, and he found himself both excited and apprehensive about the possibility. They had nearly reached the portrait of the fat lady when a cold, drawling voice interrupted their conversation. "Potter. A word." Draco Malfoy stood in an adjacent corridor, flanked by 2 large boys who looked more like bodyguards than students. His pale, pointed face wore an expression of calculated neutrality. "What do you want, Malfoy?" Ron demanded, stepping slightly in front of Harry. "This doesn't concern you, Weasley," Malfoy replied dismissively. "I'm addressing Potter, sovereign to sovereign, you might say." "Sovereign?" Harry repeated skeptically. "The Omega Aura marks you as magical royalty, according to the oldest traditions," Malfoy explained, his tone oddly respectful despite the arrogance in his posture. My family preserves knowledge of such ancient hierarchies. I'm not royalty, Harry insisted. It's just some weird magical thing that happened. Hardly, just some weird magical thing, Malfoy countered. The manifestation of the Omega Aura signifies a fundamental shift in magical power dynamics. Those with proper magical heritage understand its significance. Get to the point, Malfoy, Ron interjected impatiently. Malfoy shot him an irritated glance but continued addressing Harry. I'm offering an alliance, Potter. Despite our initial misunderstanding on the train, our families share noble magical heritage. Combined, we could lead Hogwarts into a new era of proper magical governance. Harry studied the Slytherin boy, sensing genuine belief behind the pompous words. I appreciate the offer, he said carefully, but I'm still figuring out what all this means. I'm not looking to lead anyone or change any governance. You misunderstand, Malfoy pressed. The aura chose you for a reason. Denying your destiny insults magic itself. Maybe magic should have consulted me first, Harry replied, with a hint of the dry humor that had sustained him through years with the Dursleys. Look, Malfoy, I'm just trying to get through my first day of classes without turning something into accidental gold or setting the castle on fire. Politics can wait. Malfoy's expression hardened slightly. Your power demands respect, Potter, whether you accept your role or not. When you're ready to embrace your true position, you'll find that some wizarding families are more equipped to guide you than others. His gaze shifted pointedly to Ron. I think I can figure out the wrong sort for myself, thanks, Harry said coolly, echoing their exchange on the train. A flash of anger crossed Malfoy's face, quickly mastered. As you wish. The offer remains open. Your Majesty. He turned on his heel, his two hulking companions following like obedient shadows. Pompous git, Ron muttered as they continued to the portrait hole. Sovereign to sovereign, what rubbish. Is there any truth to what he said? Harry asked as they climbed through into the common room. About the aura having something to do with magical royalty. Ron hesitated. Sort of, I think. Dad mentioned once that before the ministry, wizard communities were sometimes led by those with special magical connections, guardians or stewards, not kings exactly. But that was ages ago, before the statute of secrecy and all that. The common room was crowded with Gryffindors returning from classes, many of whom fell silent when Harry entered. He felt his cheeks warm at the attention but tried to act normally, finding seats near the fireplace. Ignore them, Ron advised. They'll get used to it eventually. Hopefully before we graduate, Harry replied wryly. He tried to focus on his Transfiguration homework, but found concentration difficult with the constant whispers and stares. Just as he was considering retreating to the dormitory, Fred and George Weasley arrived with welcome distraction in the form of chocolate frogs, liberated from the kitchens. Thought you might need sustenance before your special lesson, Fred explained, tossing him a frog. And an escort, George added. We happen to know a shortcut to McGonagall's office. Harry checked his watch, startled to find it was already 7:15. Thanks, he said, gathering his books. I wasn't looking forward to navigating all those stairs again. The twins led him through a concealed passage behind a tapestry depicting wizards brewing potions, emerging just around the corner from Professor McGonagall's office. Secret of the trade, Fred winked. Comes in handy when you're late for detention. Which we never are, of course, George added innocently. Harry thanked them again before knocking on McGonagall's door, precisely at 7 o'clock. Enter, called the professor's crisp voice. To Harry's surprise, he found not just Professor McGonagall but also Professor Flitwick and Dumbledore himself waiting within. The office had been rearranged, desks pushed aside to create an open space in the center where a complex magical diagram had been drawn on the floor in shimmering silver lines. Good evening, Mr. Potter, McGonagall greeted him. As you can see, you'll have additional instructors for tonight's session. We're most excited to work with you, Mr. Potter," squeaked Professor Flitwick, bouncing slightly on his toes. "The manifestation of the Omega Aura presents a unique research opportunity, educational opportunity." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "What Professor Flitwick means is that we are here to help you understand and control the extraordinary gift that has awakened within you." "Thank you, professors," Harry said, setting his bag aside. "I could definitely use the help. Today was challenging." "We've heard reports of your magical performance in classes," McGonagall noted, lips thinning slightly. "Golden flames in defense against the dark arts, was it?" "I didn't mean to," Harry hastened to explain. "It just happened." "Of course," Dumbledore nodded. "The Omega Aura responds to intention and emotion more directly than ordinary magic. Tonight, we will begin basic exercises to help you establish conscious control." Flitwick gestured to the silver diagram on the floor. "This is a magical resonance circle, a tool used for centuries to help young wizards visualize and direct their innate magical currents. If you would stand in the center, Mr. Potter." Harry stepped carefully into the circle, avoiding the intricate silver lines. Immediately, the diagram began to glow with a soft light, the lines pulsing gently in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Fascinating response," Flitwick murmured, making notes on a small parchment. "The circle typically requires activation, but it's responding spontaneously to your presence. Now, Mr. Potter," McGonagall instructed, "I want you to close your eyes and focus on your breathing. Become aware of the magic flowing through you." Harry obeyed, shutting his eyes and taking deep breaths. The now familiar warmth of the Omega Aura surged beneath his skin, more responsive when given direct attention. Without opening his eyes, he sensed the silver lines of the diagram glowing brighter, responding to his awareness. "Good," came Dumbledore's quiet voice. "You perceive the magical currents naturally. Now, try to visualize that power as a stream flowing through your core. Can you see it?" "Yes," Harry replied, surprised to find he could indeed visualize the magic, a golden river flowing through him, connecting to a vast ocean of power beyond himself. "It's golden, like sunlight on water." "Excellent," Dumbledore continued. "Now, imagine narrowing that stream. Picture yourself as the riverbank, guiding and containing the flow." Harry concentrated, visualizing the golden stream becoming narrower, its flow more controlled. The warmth beneath his skin receded slightly, becoming a more focused, contained presence. "The aural emanation is stabilizing," Flitwick reported excitedly. "Magical saturation levels decreasing to manageable parameters." "Open your eyes, Mr. Potter," McGonagall instructed. "But maintain that sense of containment." Harry opened his eyes, maintaining his visualization of the controlled golden stream. The professors were watching him with varying expressions, McGonagall's assessment, Flitwick's excitement, and Dumbledore's thoughtful consideration. "The resonance circle has harmonized," Dumbledore observed, gesturing to the silver diagram, which now pulsed with a steady, controlled rhythm. "You're finding your equilibrium, Harry." "It feels calmer," Harry admitted. "Less like it's pushing to get out." "That's precisely what we're aiming for," McGonagall confirmed. "Now, let's test your control with a simple exercise." She placed a feather on the floor at the edge of the circle. "Without using your wand, and while maintaining that sense of controlled flow, try to direct a small portion of your magic toward the feather. Just enough to make it rise, not shoot to the ceiling." Harry focused on the feather, imagining a thin tendril of golden energy extending from his core toward it. The feather trembled, then rose slowly into the air, hovering steadily at eye level. "Remarkable control for a first attempt," Flitwick enthused. "Most wandless levitation manifests as uncontrolled bursts, not precise manipulation. The visualization technique provides a natural framework," Dumbledore explained. "The Omega Aura responds to mental construct more readily than ordinary magic." For the next hour, they guided Harry through increasingly complex exercises, teaching him to modulate his magical output through visualization and intent. By the end of the session, he could reliably produce controlled magical effects without his wand, lighting candles with a thought, moving small objects with precise control, and even changing the color of a cup from red to blue and back again. "You've made excellent progress," McGonagall said as the session concluded. "With continued practice, you should be able to maintain appropriate control during standard classes." "Indeed," Flitwick agreed. "I'll provide additional reading on visualization techniques for magical modulation. Most helpful for situations where precise control is required." Dumbledore stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Harry's shoulder. "Remember, Harry, the aura is not separate from you, it is an expression of your truest magical nature. Learning to harmonize with it, rather than restrain it, will be your path forward." "What about the other things, sir?" Harry asked hesitantly. "The way the castle responds to me, how plants lean toward me in herbology, and—" He paused, unsure whether to mention his reaction to Quirrell. "All manifestations of the Omega Aura's connection to fundamental magical forces," Dumbledore replied. "Hogwarts itself is a magical entity of sorts, it recognizes the aura's resonance with its own enchantments. As for living things with magical properties, they naturally respond to the concentrated magical presence you embody." Harry nodded, though he noted that Dumbledore's explanation felt incomplete somehow. "Will there be more sessions like this?" 3 evenings a week, McGonagall confirmed. "We'll rotate locations between our offices to accommodate different aspects of your training. Professor Snape has also agreed to contribute his expertise in magical containment." Harry tried not to grimace at the mention of Snape, whose cold gaze had followed him throughout the day whenever their paths crossed. "One final thing before you go, Harry," Dumbledore said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "The awakening of the Omega Aura has drawn considerable attention. While we've screened your mail and secured the castle, you must exercise caution. Not all who seek connection to your power have benevolent intentions. Malfoy approached me today," Harry admitted. "Talked about alliances and magical heritage." "Ah, young Mr. Malfoy," Dumbledore nodded. "His family maintains ties to old magical traditions, some beneficial, others less so. I would advise careful consideration of any alliances at this stage. I told him I'm just trying to get through classes without setting things on fire." A smile crinkled Dumbledore's eyes. "A commendably practical approach. Now, you should return to Gryffindor Tower. I believe Professor McGonagall has arranged an escort to avoid undue attention." On cue, a knock sounded at the office door. McGonagall opened it to reveal Percy Weasley standing outside, prefect badge gleaming on his chest. "Right on time, Mr. Weasley," she approved. "Please escort Mr. Potter back to Gryffindor Tower using the Eastern Corridor route." "Yes, Professor," Percy replied, standing a little straighter. He nodded formally to Harry. "Ready when you are." Harry thanked the professors and followed Percy into the corridor, his mind whirling with new knowledge and techniques. The prefect maintained a professional silence until they were climbing the main staircase. "The professors are teaching you control techniques?" he asked, curiosity finally overcoming decorum. "Yeah," Harry confirmed, finding no reason to keep it secret. "Visualization methods, mostly. To keep the aura from overcharging simple spells." Percy nodded thoughtfully. "Sensible approach. Though I imagine the applications extend beyond merely tempering your magical output." He glanced sideways at Harry. "The Omega Aura is referenced in some of the advanced magical theory texts, said to enable forms of wandless magic that ordinary wizards cannot achieve. Professor McGonagall had me levitating feathers without a wand," Harry admitted. Percy's eyes widened. "On your first day?" "Most impressive." He adjusted his glasses. "I could lend you some supplementary texts on magical theory, if you're interested. Understanding the principles might help with your control." "That would be great, thanks," Harry replied, surprised by the offer. They reached the portrait hole without further incident. The fat lady blinked sleepily at them as Percy provided the password, Caput Draconis, then swung open to reveal the Gryffindor common room, still bustling with students despite the late hour. Ron waved from a corner where he was playing wizard chess with Seamus. "How'd it go?" he called as Harry approached. "Better than expected," Harry replied, dropping into a nearby armchair. "They taught me how to stop turning matches into silver lions, at least." "Shame, that was brilliant," Ron grinned. "Knight to e5, he added to the chessboard, where a small stone knight moved of its own accord to capture Seamus's bishop. "They had him doing wandless magic," Percy informed them, hovering nearby with unusual lack of formality. First session. Seamus looked up from the chessboard, eyes widening. "Wandless? That's 7th-year material, at least." "It's different with the aura," Harry explained uncomfortably. "More about visualization than technique." "Still amazing," Seamus insisted. "My cousin's in aura training, and he says wandless magic separates the truly gifted from the merely competent." Harry shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the praise. "It's just because of this Omega thing, not because I'm specially talented." "Don't sell yourself short," Percy advised. "The aura may provide the power, but directing it requires personal ability." He straightened his prefect badge. "I'll fetch those theory texts for you tomorrow, Harry. For now, I should complete my rounds." As Percy departed, Hermione approached from a nearby table piled high with books. "I've been researching wandless magic," she announced, sitting beside them. "It's intrinsically connected to a wizard's magical core, their fundamental essence. Most can only access it through a wand as a focusing tool, but historical accounts suggest certain magical bloodlines maintain the ability to channel magic directly." "Bloodlines?" Harry questioned. "But my mother was Muggle-born." "That's what makes the Omega aura so fascinating," Hermione continued excitedly. "According to Magical Manifestations Through the Ages, it's not strictly hereditary but can emerge in response to magical necessity, a sort of adaptive response to extraordinary magical circumstances." "Like surviving the killing curse?" Ron suggested. Hermione nodded. "Possibly. Or perhaps it was always latent in your magical signature, and the sorting activated it somehow." Harry considered this as conversation shifted to speculation about the next day's classes. The common room gradually emptied as students headed to bed, until only Harry, Ron, and Hermione remained by the dying fire. "We should get some sleep," Ron yawned eventually. "Potions tomorrow with the Slytherins." "And Professor Snape," Hermione added. "I've heard he favors his own house." "Great," Harry muttered. "Another teacher who'll probably stare at me all class." "At least you can control your magic better now," Ron pointed out as they climbed the stairs to the boys' dormitory. "Less chance of accidentally turning your cauldron into solid gold or something." Harry laughed despite his apprehension. "That would probably just make Snape hate me more." As they prepared for bed, Harry practiced the visualization techniques he'd learned, containing the golden flow of his magic to a manageable stream. The faint glow that had emanated from his skin the previous night was now barely perceptible, just a hint of golden light in the darkness, pulsing gently with his heartbeat. In the quiet of the night, as his roommate's breathing deepened into sleep, Harry contemplated the extraordinary turn his life had taken. 1 month ago, he'd been sleeping in a cupboard under the stairs, unaware of his magical heritage. Now he stood at the center of ancient powers and prophecies, carrying an aura that even Dumbledore regarded with wonder. Just another normal day for the boy who lived, he thought wryly as sleep claimed him. In his dreams, golden light flowed through Hogwarts's ancient stones, connecting him to the castle in ways he was only beginning to understand. Chapter 2, Trials of Fire and Shadow. Harry's first week at Hogwarts passed in a blur of classes, whispers, and nightly training sessions. The visualization techniques Professor McGonagall had taught him proved invaluable for maintaining control of the Omega aura during standard lessons, though occasional flares of golden light still accompanied his spellwork when his concentration slipped. Potions with Professor Snape had been every bit as unpleasant as anticipated. The hook-nosed professor had spent the entire lesson alternating between ignoring Harry completely and subjecting him to pointed questions about obscure potion ingredients. When Harry's cauldron had briefly glowed with golden light while brewing a simple cure for boils, Snape had vanished the contents with a contemptuous flick of his wand. "Showing off, Potter," he had sneered. "Your special circumstances do not exempt you from following precise instructions." Friday morning found Harry at breakfast with Ron and Hermione, reviewing his class schedule while owls swooped overhead delivering mail. "Double defense against the dark arts this afternoon," Ron noted, helping himself to sausages. "Maybe Quirrell will let slip what the turban's really for." Fred and George reckon he stuffed it with garlic to ward off vampires. Harry frowned, touching his scar reflexively. The uncomfortable pressure he'd felt in Quirrell's presence had persisted throughout the week, though he'd managed to keep the aura's defensive responses contained. He still hadn't mentioned it to his professors, unsure whether it was a legitimate concern or simply his own magical sensitivity overreacting. "Harry," Hermione interrupted his thoughts, "did you finish Professor McGonagall's essay on transformation principles? I found the section on inherent magical resonance particularly relevant to your situation." "Most of it," Harry replied. "Percy lent me some theory books that helped explain the difference between transfiguration and transmutation. Apparently what I did with that match, turning it into silver instead of just changing its shape, crosses into alchemical territory." "Blimey, are you actually enjoying homework?" Ron asked incredulously. "The aura's changed you more than I thought." Harry laughed. "Not exactly. But understanding the theory helps me control the practical parts better." He paused as Hedwig swooped down, dropping a note beside his plate. "Finally got some mail that made it through screening." The note was from Hagrid, inviting Harry for tea that afternoon after classes. Harry quickly penned an acceptance on the back, asking if Ron and Hermione could join him, and sent Hedwig off again. As they finished breakfast and gathered their books, a tall, dark-haired boy in Ravenclaw robes approached their table. Harry recognized him as one of the older students who had been watching him throughout the week. "Potter," the boy greeted with formal courtesy. "Alexander Noir, 7th year. I wonder if I might have a word." Harry glanced at Ron and Hermione. "I'll catch up with you in charms," he told them, then turned back to the Ravenclaw. "What can I help you with?" Noir's eyes, an unusual shade of violet, studied Harry with clinical interest. "Not here. Perhaps somewhere more private?" Harry hesitated, remembering Dumbledore's warnings about caution. "The entrance hall should be quiet enough now that breakfast is ending." The older student nodded, leading the way out of the great hall. Once they stood in the relative privacy of a corner near the marble staircase, Noir spoke again, his voice carrying a slight accent Harry couldn't quite place. "I'll be direct, Potter. I represent an interest group within the wizarding community, one that predates the ministry and maintains connections to ancient magical traditions. The emergence of the Omega Aura has significant implications for our organizational priorities." Harry's wariness increased. "What kind of organization?" "We have many names. The Circle of Ancestral Magic. The Covenant of 13. The Old Ways Assembly." Noir smiled thinly. "Labels are unimportant. What matters is our shared concern for preserving magical heritage that the ministry would rather see forgotten." "And what does this have to do with me?" "The Omega Aura isn't merely a personal power boost, Potter. It's a manifestation of primordial magic, the kind that existed before wands, before structured spells, before the arbitrary divisions between acceptable and forbidden magical practices." Harry frowned. "You mean dark arts?" "I mean magic in its purest form," Noir corrected smoothly. "The aura connects you to those original currents. My associates believe you could benefit from guidance beyond what Hogwarts can officially provide. Let me guess, you're volunteering." Noir inclined his head. "I could serve as an intermediary. Provide texts and training materials not found in the restricted section. Introduce you to practitioners who understand the aura's true potential." Harry studied the older student, noting the careful calculation behind his violet eyes. Despite his diplomatic approach, something about Noir reminded Harry of Uncle Vernon's more slippery business associates, the ones who smiled while looking for angles to exploit. "I appreciate the offer," Harry said carefully, "but Professor Dumbledore is already arranging special training sessions." Noir's smile tightened. "Dumbledore is a great wizard, certainly. But his personal history has left him cautious about certain magical traditions. The Omega Aura transcends modern categorizations of light and dark. Limiting your understanding to approved curriculum would be like trying to redirect a river through a garden hose." "I'll keep that in mind," Harry replied noncommittally. "But for now, I'm still learning the basics." "Of course. You have time to consider." Noir reached into his robes and extracted a small, leather-bound book. "A token of good faith. This text discusses the historical manifestations of the Omega Aura throughout wizarding history. Nothing forbidden, merely information the Ministry finds inconvenient to acknowledge." Harry hesitated before accepting the book. The leather felt unusually warm beneath his fingers, and his awakened magic detected subtle enchantments woven into its binding, preservation charms, mostly, but also something more complex that he couldn't identify. "Thanks," he said, tucking it into his bag. "I should get to charms." "One more thing, Potter," Moore said as Harry turned to leave. "Watch the Slytherin table at dinner tonight. You might find the seating arrangement informative." Before Harry could question this cryptic statement, the Ravenclaw strode away, robes billowing dramatically behind him. Harry shook his head, wondering if all older wizards practiced that particular effect, then hurried to charms, arriving just as Professor Flitwick was calling roll. "Cutting it rather close, Mr. Potter," the diminutive professor remarked with a knowing smile. "Everything all right?" "Yes, Professor. Sorry I'm late." Harry slipped into a seat between Ron and Hermione, who immediately bombarded him with whispered questions about Noir. Later, he murmured as Flitwick began demonstrating the levitation charm, Wingardium Leviosa, which they would be practicing that day. The charm presented a new challenge for Harry's control. While the visualization techniques worked well for restraining his magic's intensity, the precision required for controlled levitation demanded a different approach. His first attempt sent the feather rocketing toward the ceiling with such force that it embedded itself in the stonework. "Enthusiasm is commendable," Flitwick remarked, dislodging the feather with a flick of his wand, "but perhaps a more delicate touch, Mr. Potter." Harry nodded, concentrating on his visualized stream of magic, narrowing it further while simultaneously imagining a gentle cradle of force beneath the replacement feather. His second attempt proved more successful. The feather rose steadily to hover at eye level, though a faint golden glow suffused the object, causing it to slowly transform from ordinary white to shimmering gold. "Fascinating side effect," Flitwick commented, examining the now golden feather after Harry set it down. "Spontaneous transmutation as a byproduct of sustained magical contact. Most unusual in levitation contexts." By the end of class, Harry had managed to levitate his feather with reasonable control, though it still gained a slight golden sheen. Hermione, after multiple precise attempts, succeeded as well, earning 5 points for Gryffindor. Ron, frustrated by his unsuccessful efforts, seemed relieved when the bell rang. "What did that Ravenclaw bloke want?" he asked as they headed toward History of Magic. Harry explained Noir's offer as they walked, showing them the leather-bound book. "The Circle of Ancestral Magic?" Hermione repeated, looking troubled. "I've read references to them. They're an old pureblood society that opposes ministry regulations on experimental magic. Some say they practice borderline dark arts under the guise of preserving traditions." "Great," Harry sighed. "Another group trying to use me for something." "At least he gave you a book instead of threatening you," Ron pointed out pragmatically. "What did he mean about watching the Slytherin table?" "No idea," Harry admitted. "Probably some political maneuvering I'm supposed to notice." History of Magic proved as soporific as ever, with Professor Binns droning on about goblin rebellions while floating through his lectern. Harry used the time to examine Noir's book beneath his desk, finding it filled with dense academic text interspersed with illuminated illustrations of wizards surrounded by golden auras similar to what had manifested during his sorting. One passage particularly caught his attention. The bearer of the Omega Aura stands at the confluence of magical currents, capable of perceiving and manipulating the fundamental forces that more limited practitioners access only through rigid, formalized spellwork. Historical accounts from the Arcanum Invictus describe aura bearers achieving direct transmutation of elements, communion with magical creatures across species barriers, and attunement with ley lines that permitted feats of magical engineering now considered mythological. Harry frowned, closing the book as the bell rang. The descriptions aligned with some of his experiences, the intuitive understanding of transfiguration, the way plants responded to his presence, but the text carried undertones of superiority that made him uncomfortable. Lunch passed quickly, with Harry filling Ron and Hermione in on more details from his conversation with Noir. As they were finishing their shepherd's pie, Professor McGonagall approached the Gryffindor table. "Mr. Potter," she said, her voice carrying its usual crisp authority, "the headmaster requests your presence at 3 o'clock this afternoon in the 7th-floor corridor by the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. Your defense against the dark arts professor has been informed of your absence." "Yes, Professor," Harry replied, curious about the unusual location. "May I ask what this is regarding?" McGonagall's expression softened slightly. "Professor Dumbledore believes he has located a suitable environment for more, expansive training of your abilities. Somewhere the side effects will be less disruptive to the castle's normal operations." After McGonagall departed, Harry turned to his friends. "Looks like I'll miss defense. Will you take notes for me?" "Of course," Hermione promised, while Ron looked envious. "Lucky escape if you ask me. Quirrell's classroom gives me a headache, all that garlic." The afternoon passed quickly, and at 10 minutes to 3, Harry made his way to the 7th floor, navigating the moving staircases with growing confidence. He found Professor Dumbledore already waiting by the bizarre tapestry depicting trolls and tutus, engaged in what appeared to be friendly conversation with one of the castle's many ghosts. "Ah, Harry, right on time," Dumbledore greeted cheerfully. "I was just discussing the architectural history of this corridor with the Grey Lady. Most enlightening." The ghost, a beautiful but haughty-looking woman Harry recognized as Ravenclaw's house ghost, regarded him with piercing eyes. "The Omega Aura," she murmured in a voice like distant wind. "I remember when last it walked these halls, though that bearer wielded it differently." Without further comment, she drifted away through a nearby wall. "The ghost seemed to know about the aura," Harry observed, watching her disappear. "They perceive magical energies differently than the living," Dumbledore explained. "Having transcended physical limitations, they often recognize patterns and resonances we might miss." He smiled, eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. "But we're not here for ghostly consultations today. I wish to introduce you to a rather special feature of Hogwarts." Dumbledore began pacing back and forth along the blank wall opposite the tapestry. To Harry's astonishment, after the third pass, an ornate door materialized where blank stone had been moments before. "Welcome," Dumbledore said, gesturing toward the door, "to the Room of Requirement. Also known by those who have discovered it as the come-and-go room. It transforms itself into whatever the seeker needs most at that moment." Harry followed the headmaster through the door into a vast chamber unlike anything he'd seen at Hogwarts. The space resembled a combination of training arena, library, and magical laboratory. One section contained practice dummies and targets, another held shelves of unusual magical instruments, a third featured cushioned meditation areas surrounded by what appeared to be natural stone formations. "This is brilliant," Harry breathed, feeling the room's magic respond to his presence, not serving him like the castle's normal architecture, but acknowledging him as a kindred magical entity. "I thought you might appreciate it," Dumbledore smiled. "The room provides the perfect environment for exploring the more exuberant manifestations of your abilities without concerning ourselves with collateral damage to irreplaceable historical artifacts." As if to demonstrate, he gestured toward a stone pillar in the center of the room. "Perhaps you might show me how your control has progressed." Attempt to channel your magic toward that pillar, don't restrain yourself this time. Harry hesitated. You want me to let go? Precisely. Within these walls, we need not fear accidental transfigurations or unintended enchantments. The room will absorb and redistribute excess magical energy. Harry turned toward the pillar, taking a deep breath. For days, he'd focused on containing the Omega Aura's power, narrowing its flow to accommodate standard first-year spellwork. The prospect of intentionally releasing that constraint felt both thrilling and terrifying. Closing his eyes, he visualized the golden stream of magic within him expanding, widening from controlled brook to rushing river. The familiar warmth surged through his veins, and he extended his hand toward the pillar, directing the flow outward without restraint. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Golden light erupted from his palm in a concentrated beam that struck the pillar with thunderous impact. The stone glowed white-hot for an instant before transforming, not crumbling or melting, but reshaping itself into an intricate sculpture of a phoenix with wings outstretched, rendered in what appeared to be marble shot through with veins of actual gold. Harry staggered slightly, momentarily dizzy from the release of power. When his vision cleared, he stared at the sculpture in shock. I didn't mean to create that specifically, he admitted. I was just thinking about letting the magic flow. Fascinating, Dumbledore murmured, approaching the phoenix sculpture. Your magic appears to manifest creative intent even without conscious direction. Note the phoenix motif, perhaps influenced by your recent interaction with Fawkes. Harry nodded, recalling the connection he'd felt with Dumbledore's familiar. It felt natural. Like the magic knew what it wanted to become. An apt description of the Omega Aura's fundamental nature, Dumbledore agreed. It represents magic in its self-determining state, responsive to your will but possessing a certain autonomy in its expression. For the next hour, Dumbledore guided Harry through exercises designed not to restrain the aura, but to channel it constructively. Rather than forcing the power into conventional spell forms, they explored ways to direct its natural expression toward specific intentions. By the session's end, Harry had created cascading fountains of golden light, temporarily transmuted air into swirling patterns of luminescent butterflies, and repaired a deliberately shattered mirror with a gesture that not only restored its original form but enhanced its reflective properties. Excellent progress, Dumbledore pronounced as they prepared to conclude. I believe you're beginning to harmonize with the aura rather than simply containing it. It feels more natural this way, Harry admitted. Like I'm working with it instead of against it. Precisely the approach we should cultivate. Dumbledore's expression grew more serious. I understand you've been approached by Alexander Noir. Harry wasn't entirely surprised that Dumbledore knew about the encounter. He offered me guidance beyond what Hogwarts provides. Gave me a book about historical aura bearers. May I see this book? Harry retrieved it from his bag, handing it to the headmaster. Dumbledore examined the binding carefully before opening it, his expression thoughtful. Luminaries of the Ancient Current, he read from the title page. A rare text, though not inherently problematic. However, I note certain modifications to the binding, subtle enchantments designed to influence the reader's perspective over time. Influence how? Harry asked, alarmed. Nothing immediately dangerous, Dumbledore assured him. Rather, a gradual reinforcement of viewpoints favorable to certain interpretations of magical hierarchy. The kind of subtle manipulation that shapes opinion so gently the reader believes the conclusions are entirely their own. He closed the book. I would be happy to remove these enchantments if you wish to keep the book. The historical information itself is valuable, if somewhat selectively presented. Harry nodded, unsettled by the revelation. I'd appreciate that, sir. As for Mr. Noir himself, Dumbledore continued, while his academic record at Hogwarts is exemplary, his family maintains connections to magical societies that espouse concerning perspectives on power and its appropriate distribution. The Circle of Ancestral Magic. Among others. They represent a philosophy that magical ability confers inherent rights to dominance, a perspective that has led to dark outcomes throughout history, regardless of how elegantly it is presented. Dumbledore returned the book, now subtly altered. The leather no longer felt warm to the touch, and Harry's magical sensitivity detected the absence of the complex enchantments he'd noted earlier. "I should warn you, Harry, that young Mr. Noir is unlikely to be the last to approach you with offers of special guidance. The Omega Aura represents significant magical potential that various factions within the wizarding world will seek to influence or control." "He mentioned watching the Slytherin table tonight," Harry recalled. "Said I'd find the seating arrangement informative." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. "Indeed? That suggests internal maneuvering among the old families. Perhaps we should both pay attention at dinner." As they left the room of requirement, which vanished behind them as seamlessly as it had appeared, Dumbledore added one final piece of advice. "Trust your instincts, Harry. The aura responds to your fundamental character, your intentions, your values. Those who would push you toward paths that feel wrong seek to use your power, not help you understand it." After thanking the headmaster, Harry headed toward Hagrid's hut, where he'd arranged to meet Ron and Hermione after their defense class. The autumn air felt crisp against his skin as he crossed the grounds, golden sunlight filtering through the trees bordering the forbidden forest. He found himself noticing magical currents he'd previously overlooked, the subtle protective enchantments surrounding Hagrid's dwelling, the magical signatures of various plants in the nearby gardens, even traces of magical creatures that had recently passed this way. Hagrid welcomed them warmly, serving rock cakes that threatened dental damage and strong tea in bucket-sized mugs. After initial pleasantries, the conversation inevitably turned to the Omega Aura. "Knew ya were special, Harry, but this is something else," Hagrid said, his beetle-black eyes crinkling with pride. "Not since the Founder's time, from what I hear." "You know about the aura?" Harry asked, surprised. "Course I do. Keeper of keys ain't just about opening doors, you know. Part of my job's knowin' the magical history of Hogwarts." Hagrid leaned forward conspiratorially, his massive beard almost dipping into his tea. "The last bearer was Godric Gryffindor himself, or so the stories say. Used the aura to lay the deepest protections into the castle foundations. That explains why the castle responds to you, Harry," Hermione said excitedly. "If Gryffindor used the aura in creating Hogwarts' enchantments, they'd naturally recognize its signature when it reappeared." Hagrid nodded. "Smart thinkin', Hermione. The castle's alive in its own way, got memory in its stones." "Has Dumbledore said anything about why the aura appeared now?" Ron asked, wisely setting aside his rock cake rather than risking his teeth further. Hagrid's expression darkened slightly. "Some things are best left to Dumbledore to explain when the time's right. But I will say this, magic this powerful don't awaken without good reason." He fixed Harry with an unusually serious gaze. "Be careful who ya trust, Harry. Plenty will come sniffin' around, offering friendship that ain't genuine." "Alexander Noir already tried," Harry confirmed, telling Hagrid about the morning's encounter. "Noir," Hagrid grunted disapprovingly. "Old family with complicated history. Not Death Eaters during the war, but not exactly opposed to you-know-whose ideas neither. Just smart enough to keep their hands clean." As they walked back to the castle for dinner, Harry shared details of his session with Dumbledore and the Room of Requirement. "It sounds amazing," Hermione enthused. "A room that becomes whatever you need. I wonder if it's mentioned in Hogwarts, a history." "Forget the room," Ron interjected. "You created a solid gold phoenix statue just by thinking about it." "That's bloody brilliant." "It wasn't solid gold," Harry corrected. "Just marble with gold veins. And I wasn't thinking about a phoenix specifically, it just happened." "Still incredible," Ron insisted. "Most wizards spend years learning Transfiguration that advanced." The Great Hall was already filling with students when they arrived for dinner. Harry noticed increased activity at the Slytherin table, where an unusual amount of movement and reorganization seemed to be taking place. Remembering Noir's cryptic comment, he paid close attention as they took their seats at the Gryffindor table. The typical Slytherin hierarchy had always been apparent, older students claiming prime positions, first years relegated to the far end. Tonight, however, the arrangement had subtly shifted. Draco Malfoy, normally seated among his fellow first years, now occupied a position near the center, flanked by older students who appeared to be deferring to him in some way. "That's weird," Ron commented, following Harry's gaze. "Malfoy's sitting with the third years. First years never get those spots." "Not just that," Hermione observed. "Look at who's around him. Cassandra Greengrass, Adrian Pusey, the Caro twins, all from prominent old families." Harry caught Dumbledore's eye at the staff table and saw the headmaster nod slightly, confirming he'd noticed the same rearrangement. Before he could comment further, the food appeared, temporarily distracting Ron from Slytherin politics. Halfway through the meal, Harry felt a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, the feeling of being watched more intently than the usual curious glances he'd grown accustomed to. Looking up, he found Malfoy staring at him with calculated intensity. When their eyes met, the Slytherin raised his goblet in a subtle toast, a gesture immediately mirrored by those seated around him. "What was that about?" Ron asked through a mouthful of steak and kidney pie. "A public declaration," came the voice of Percy Weasley, who had moved closer upon noticing the exchange. "Malfoy's faction is acknowledging Potter's magical status." "Faction?" Harry repeated. Percy nodded, looking unusually serious. "The Slytherin seating arrangement isn't random. It reflects internal power structures, who's allied with whom, which family philosophies hold sway. Malfoy's normally too young to command that position, but he appears to have rallied support among the traditionalist faction." "And the toast?" Hermione asked. "Old pure-blood custom. Public acknowledgement of magical sovereignty." Percy adjusted his glasses. "They're not pledging allegiance exactly, but they are formally recognizing the Omega Aura's significance according to ancient customs." Harry frowned. "So Malfoy's using me to boost his own status? By associating himself with the Aura?" "Politics is rarely that simple," Percy replied. "My guess is he's positioning himself as your equal in some sense, a representative of traditional magical authority acknowledging a new magical power. It elevates both of you in different ways." "I didn't ask for any of this," Harry muttered. "Unfortunately, that's irrelevant to those playing these games," Percy said with surprising sympathy. "Power structures adapt to new realities whether the central figures consent or not." As dinner concluded, Harry noticed Malfoy detach himself from his entourage and make his way toward the Gryffindor table. The blonde Slytherin stopped before Harry, his usual sneering demeanor replaced by formal courtesy. "Potter," he said, loud enough to be heard by surrounding students but not quite a projection. "House Malfoy formally acknowledges the manifestation of the Omega Aura and extends an invitation to discuss matters of mutual interest regarding ancient magical traditions. As scions of respected lineages, we share certain responsibilities to magical heritage." The calculated performance had clearly been rehearsed, designed to be witnessed by strategic observers throughout the hall. Harry was acutely aware of how many students had fallen silent to watch the exchange, including Noir at the Ravenclaw table. "Thank you for the acknowledgement," Harry replied carefully, recalling formal phrases from wizarding culture books he'd read over the summer. "I'm still learning about these traditions and my unexpected connection to them." Malfoy nodded, apparently satisfied with this diplomatic non-answer. "The offer remains open. Some matters are best discussed between those who understand the weight of magical legacy." With a slight incline of his head, not quite a bow, but a notable show of respect from the typically arrogant Slytherin, he returned to his table. "Well played," Percy murmured as conversations resumed around them. "You neither accepted nor rejected his overture. Maintaining neutrality is wise at this stage." "I wasn't trying to be political," Harry protested. "I just didn't know what else to say." "Sometimes the best political moves are unintentional," Percy replied with a slight smile. "In any case, you've given yourself room to maneuver." As they left the Great Hall, Harry noticed Professor McGonagall gesturing for him to approach the staff table. "I'll catch up with you in the common room," he told Ron and Hermione before making his way to his head of house. "Mr. Potter," McGonagall said once he was within quiet conversation range. "The headmaster asked me to inform you that your next special session will take place tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Professor Snape will be joining us." Harry couldn't quite suppress his grimace. "Is that necessary, Professor?" McGonagall's expression softened marginally. "Professor Snape possesses expertise in magical control that will be valuable to your training, regardless of personal feelings. The headmaster believes his perspective essential for your complete understanding of the aura's potential." "Yes, Professor," Harry sighed, resigned to an uncomfortable Saturday afternoon. "One more thing, Potter," she added, lowering her voice. "Professor Dumbledore suggests you bring your invisibility cloak to tomorrow's session." Harry stared at her in confusion. "My what?" McGonagall blinked, then pursed her lips in what might have been embarrassment. "Ah. I see he hasn't. Well, expect a package this evening, Mr. Potter. Consider it a delayed inheritance." Thoroughly confused, Harry made his way back to Gryffindor Tower, where he found Ron and Hermione waiting by the fire, eager to dissect the evening's events. "Malfoy's definitely up to something," Ron insisted after Harry recounted McGonagall's message. "All that formal, House Malfoy acknowledges rubbish. Bet his father put him up to it." "It's not that simple," Hermione countered. "The old wizarding families maintain traditional protocols for interactions with significant magical manifestations. They're acknowledging the aura according to customs that predate the ministry." "Still reckon it's a ploy to get close to Harry for their own benefit," Ron muttered. Their debate was interrupted by a school owl swooping through an open window, carrying a package wrapped in plain brown paper. It dropped the parcel in Harry's lap before departing without waiting for a treat. "That was quick," Harry commented, examining the package. A note was attached to the outside in thin, slanting handwriting he didn't recognize. "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well." The note was unsigned. Harry unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a fluid, silvery gray cloth that slipped through his fingers like water. As it cascaded into his lap, Ron gasped in recognition. "That's an invisibility cloak," he exclaimed in awe. "They're incredibly rare, and valuable." "Invisibility cloak?" Harry repeated, lifting the shimmering material. "Try it on," Hermione urged, looking as amazed as Ron. Harry stood and swung the cloak around his shoulders. Ron and Hermione gasped as his body disappeared from the neck down, leaving his head floating eerily in midair. "Look at yourself," Hermione directed, pointing toward a nearby mirror. Harry moved to the mirror and pulled the hood over his head, watching in amazement as he vanished completely from view. The sensation was extraordinary. He could feel the cloak's magic interacting with the Omega aura, the two magical signatures recognizing each other like old friends reuniting. "This belonged to my father," he whispered, pulling the hood back to reveal his floating head. "Must have," Ron nodded. "And it explains how McGonagall knew about it. Dumbledore must have been keeping it for you." "But why would Dumbledore want you to bring it to tomorrow's session?" Hermione wondered. "No idea," Harry admitted, removing the cloak reluctantly. "But it feels right, somehow. Like it's been waiting for me." As he folded the cloak, Harry noticed something peculiar. Where his hands touched the fabric, faint golden traces remained momentarily, as if the cloak was absorbing and integrating the aura's signature. By morning, he suspected, the process would be complete, the ancient magical artifacts fully harmonized. Saturday dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the dormitory windows. Harry woke early, his mind racing with questions about the invisibility cloak and its connection to his father. He slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake his roommates, and retrieved the cloak from his trunk. In the privacy of early morning, he examined it more carefully. The material seemed even more remarkable in daylight, silvery but also somehow transparent, with an almost liquid quality to its movement. As he suspected, the golden traces from the previous night had been fully absorbed. The cloak now resonated subtly with his magical signature when he handled it. Wrapping it around himself experimentally, Harry felt the magic envelop him, not just concealing his physical form but somehow muting his magical presence as well. He wondered if this additional property was standard for invisibility cloaks or a result of the Omega Aura's influence. "Wicked," came Ron's voice from his bed, startling Harry. "Just a floating head at this angle. Takes some getting used to." Harry grinned, pulling the cloak off. "It's amazing. I can't believe it belonged to my dad. Family heirloom, maybe?" Ron suggested, sitting up and yawning. "Some magical artifacts get passed down through generations." By breakfast time, Harry had received another note, this one from Hagrid, inviting him, Ron, and Hermione to visit again that afternoon. Harry sent back a message explaining his special training session but suggesting they could visit afterward. "You two should go anyway," he told his friends over breakfast. "I'll join you when I can." "Are you sure?" Hermione asked. "We could wait for you." Harry shook his head. "No need. Besides, you can fill Hagrid in on all the political maneuvering from last night. He might have insights we haven't considered." The morning passed pleasantly with a Gryffindor house chess tournament organized by Percy, who seemed determined to foster house unity and distract from the constant whispers about Harry's aura. Though Harry lost spectacularly to Ron in the second round, he enjoyed watching the magical chess pieces battle across the boards, noticing how his enhanced magical perception revealed subtle enchantments in their movements. At 1:30, Harry retrieved his invisibility cloak and made his way to the 7th floor. He found Professors Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Snape already waiting by the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, engaged in what appeared to be a tense discussion that ceased abruptly when he approached. "Ah, Harry, excellent timing," Dumbledore greeted warmly. "I see you received your father's cloak." "Yes, sir. Thank you for keeping it safe for me." Snape's expression tightened at the mention of Harry's father, his dark eyes flicking to the silvery fabric with what might have been recognition before his face resumed its customary impassivity. "The cloak will serve an educational purpose today," Dumbledore explained, pacing before the blank wall to summon the room of requirement. "We'll be exploring some of the Omega Aura's more reactive properties." The door materialized, and they entered a configuration of the room dramatically different from Harry's previous visit. Instead of open training space, they found themselves in what resembled a magical obstacle course, a winding path through various magical challenges, barriers, and puzzles. "Today's session will differ from our previous work," Dumbledore continued once they were all inside. "Thus far, we've focused on controlling or directing the aura's expression through conscious intent. However, historical accounts suggest the aura also possesses autonomous protective capabilities that manifest instinctively in response to perceived threats. Like a magical immune system," Harry suggested, recalling how the aura had reacted defensively in Quirrell's presence. "An apt analogy," Dumbledore nodded. "Professor Snape has extensive experience with magical defenses and will be assisting us in evaluating these protective responses." Snape stepped forward, his black robes contrasting starkly with the colorful magical obstacles surrounding them. "The headmaster believes," he began in his silky, controlled voice, "that the Omega Aura may provide natural resistance to certain forms of magical influence and attack. Today's exercises will test those boundaries." Harry noticed that Snape's typical contempt seemed muted today, replaced by clinical professionalism that, while not warm, lacked its usual cutting edge. "We'll begin with basic magical obstacles," McGonagall explained, gesturing toward the course. "Your task is to navigate from one end to the other while wearing your invisibility cloak." "Why the cloak?" Harry asked, unfolding the silvery material. "The cloak possesses unique magical properties beyond mere invisibility," Dumbledore replied. "Properties that, when combined with the Omega Aura, may enhance certain protective aspects of both." Harry draped the cloak over his shoulders, feeling the familiar sensation of magical concealment enveloping him. At Dumbledore's nod, he began moving through the obstacle course, leaving his hood down so the professors could track his progress. The first challenge appeared simple, a curtain of shimmering magical energy that reminded Harry of heat waves rising from pavement on hot summer days. As he approached, McGonagall called out instructions. "This is a basic detection ward," she explained. "Typically used to alert the caster when someone crosses a boundary. Pass through it normally first, then with the cloak fully covering you on your return." Harry stepped through the shimmering curtain, feeling a slight tingle as he passed. Behind him, a small silver bell on a pedestal rang clearly, indicating the ward had detected him. "Now, fully conceal yourself and return," Dumbledore directed. Harry pulled the hood of the cloak over his head, disappearing completely from view. As he stepped back through the ward, something unexpected happened. Not only did the bell remain silent, but the shimmering curtain itself momentarily adopted a golden hue where his invisible form passed through it, as if the aura and the cloak together were not merely evading the ward but temporarily harmonizing with and altering its magical structure. "Fascinating," Dumbledore murmured. "Not simple evasion but adaptive integration. Continue to the next challenge, please." The second obstacle consisted of a hovering cloud of what appeared to be golden dust. Snape stepped forward to provide instruction, his voice clinically detached. "This is Revelio dust, a substance that adheres to magical concealment and renders it visible. Even the most powerful disillusionment charms cannot withstand its effects." Harry approached cautiously, still fully concealed beneath the cloak. As he entered the cloud, the dust began to swirl excitedly, clearly detecting his presence despite his invisibility. However, instead of adhering to the cloak and revealing his outline as Snape had suggested it would, the particles began to orbit around him in concentric rings, maintaining a respectful distance as if repelled by an invisible force field. "The aura is actively neutralizing the dust's adhesive properties," Snape observed with reluctant interest. "Creating a buffer zone of altered magical potential." The course continued with increasingly complex challenges, magical barriers designed to repel intruders, enchanted objects programmed to track movement, even a section where the floor itself was charmed to reveal footprints. In each case, the combination of the invisibility cloak and the Omega aura produced unexpected results, not merely evading the magical obstacles but often temporarily reconfiguring their fundamental properties. The final challenge proved the most revealing. Harry found himself facing what appeared to be a mirror, though its reflection showed not his invisible form but a swirling vortex of colors. "This," Dumbledore explained gravely, "is a legilimency mirror, a tool used to detect and visualize mental presence even when physical form is concealed. It responds to consciousness itself rather than physical or magical signatures." Harry approached the mirror warily. As he drew near, the swirling colors within it began to organize themselves, forming patterns that gradually resolved into a golden silhouette roughly matching his shape. However, where a normal mind-reading spell might reveal thoughts or memories, the mirror showed only the radiant energy of the Omega aura, its golden light seemingly impenetrable to deeper mental probing. "Remarkable," Dumbledore murmured. "Complete occlumency without conscious effort." Snape's expression had grown increasingly intense as he studied the mirror's response. "The aura appears to function as a natural barrier against mental intrusion," he observed. "Not merely deflecting legilimency attempts but actively preventing them from forming connection." Harry removed the cloak, watching as the mirror's display shifted slightly, the golden silhouette becoming more defined but no more penetrable. "Is this why Voldemort couldn't kill me?" he asked quietly. "Some natural protection from the aura?" A brief, loaded silence followed his question. McGonagall's lips thinned at Voldemort's name, while Snape's expression darkened momentarily before resuming its mask of indifference. "That particular protection," Dumbledore replied carefully, "stemmed primarily from your mother's sacrifice. However, it is possible that her actions awakened a dormant potential within you, the seed of what has now fully manifested as the Omega aura." The mention of his mother caught Harry's attention. "Professor Snape," he asked impulsively, "you knew my mother, didn't you? At school?" Snape's black eyes fixed on Harry with an intensity that made him momentarily regret the question. For an instant, Raw emotion flickered across the potion's master's face, something complex and painful that vanished so quickly Harry almost doubted he'd seen it. "We were acquainted," Snape replied finally, his voice carefully measured. "Your mother possessed exceptional magical intuition, particularly in potions and charms. Her talent for improvisation within established magical frameworks was unusual." Coming from Snape, this neutral assessment felt like effusive praise. Harry absorbed the information hungrily, filing away this rare insight into his mother's abilities. "If I may suggest," McGonagall interjected, perhaps sensing the tension, "we should proceed to the practical application portion of today's lesson." At Dumbledore's nod, the room of requirement began to reshape itself, the obstacle course dissolving into a more open training area. In the center appeared 3 pedestals, each holding a different magical artifact, a crystal orb, an ornate dagger, and a leather-bound book. Each of these objects, Dumbledore explained, contains enchantments that would typically attempt to influence the wielder's mind or magic in some way. The orb creates subtle compulsions, the dagger gradually corrupts magical intent, and the book contains knowledge that actively resists being learned. "All perfectly safe," McGonagall added quickly, noting Harry's apprehension. "Temporarily created by the room for training purposes only. Your task," Snape continued, "is to handle each object while maintaining awareness of how your aura responds to their influences." Harry approached the pedestals cautiously. He reached first for the crystal orb, which glowed with swirling inner light. As his fingers closed around it, he felt a gentle but persistent pressure against his thoughts, a soft suggestion to stare deeper into the orb, to lose himself in its patterns. Simultaneously, the golden warmth of the Omega aura flared within him, not aggressively but firmly, creating a buffer between his consciousness and the orb's influence. "I can feel it trying to draw me in," he reported. "But the aura is keeping it at a distance, like it's creating a sort of insulation around my thoughts." "Precisely as expected," Dumbledore nodded. "Try focusing on that boundary. Can you strengthen or thin it deliberately?" Harry concentrated, visualizing the protective barrier the aura had established. With conscious effort, he found he could indeed modulate its intensity, allowing the orb's influence to draw slightly closer before reinforcing the protection and pushing it back. After exploring this control with the orb, Harry moved to the dagger. This enchantment felt different, darker, more insidious. Where the orb had attempted straightforward compulsion, the dagger's magic seemed designed to subtly twist magical intent, corrupting spellwork at its source. The aura's response was correspondingly different, more active and purifying, surrounding Harry's magical core with protective resonance that neutralized the corrupting influence. The book proved most interesting of all. When Harry opened its pages, the text seemed to squirm and shift beneath his gaze, actively resisting comprehension. Each time his mind began to grasp a concept, the words would rearrange themselves, maintaining the knowledge just beyond reach. The aura's response was subtle but effective. It didn't force the text to stabilize but instead enhanced Harry's perception, allowing him to track and interpret the shifting patterns faster than they could rearrange. "Extraordinary," Flitwick commented, having apparently joined the session at some point during Harry's absorption with the artifacts. "The aura isn't merely blocking harmful magic, it's adaptively counteracting each specific type of influence with tailored responses." After Harry had thoroughly examined each artifact, Dumbledore called the group together for a concluding discussion. "What we've observed today confirms historical accounts of the Omega Aura's protective qualities," he explained. "Not merely a shield against magic, but an active force that intelligently counters magical influences according to their nature. Can these defenses be overwhelmed?" Harry asked, thinking of Voldemort's attack when he was an infant. "Any magical protection has limits," Snape replied before Dumbledore could speak. "However, the aura appears to draw from a deeper well of power than conventional defensive magic. Its limitations would likely stem from specificity rather than magnitude. Certain obscure forms of magic might briefly confuse its adaptive responses. Which is precisely why these training sessions are essential," McGonagall added. The more varied magical influences you encounter under controlled conditions, the more comprehensive your aura's protective catalog becomes. As the session concluded, Harry found himself unexpectedly addressing Snape directly. "Thank you, Professor. Your insights were helpful today." Snape regarded him with an unreadable expression, then inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement before sweeping from the room, robes billowing behind him. "Well done, Harry," Dumbledore said as they prepared to leave. "You're developing an impressive intuitive rapport with the aura. I suggest continuing to experiment with your invisibility cloak. The synergy between these ancient magics merits further exploration." Harry nodded, carefully folding the cloak. "Professor, there's something I've been meaning to ask about. In Quirrell's class, the aura seems to react defensively. And I get headaches near him, especially when he turns his back to me." Dumbledore's expression grew thoughtful. "Most interesting. Perhaps your enhanced magical sensitivity is detecting something about Professor Quirrell's unique magical condition." Condition? His encounter with vampires during his sabbatical left traces in his magical signature, Dumbledore explained. "Nothing harmful to students, I assure you, but perhaps distinctive enough to trigger protective responses from the particularly sensitive." Though the explanation seemed reasonable, Harry couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. Something in Dumbledore's carefully chosen words suggested partial truth rather than complete disclosure. Before he could press further, McGonagall reminded him of the time. "If you intended to join your friends at Hagrid's, Mr. Potter, you should depart now. It's nearly 4 o'clock." Harry thanked the professors and hurried from the room of requirement, the invisibility cloak tucked securely in his bag. As he made his way through the corridors, he reflected on the day's revelations, the cloak's enhancement of the aura's protective qualities, Snape's surprising knowledge of his mother, and the lingering questions about Quirrell's condition. Lost in thought, he nearly collided with Professor Quirrell himself, who was emerging from a staircase with his usual nervous demeanor. "P.P. Potter," Quirrell stammered, adjusting his purple turban. "In a hurry, I see." The familiar pressure built behind Harry's scar, accompanied by the aura's defensive stirring. With his newly heightened awareness of these responses, Harry noticed something he'd previously missed. The defensive reaction seemed directed specifically toward the turban, not Quirrell himself. "Sorry, Professor. On my way to meet friends." Quirrell's eyes narrowed slightly, his gaze unusually penetrating for a man who typically avoided direct eye contact. "Making good progress with your special training, I hear. Dumbledore seems quite invested in your development." "It's been helpful," Harry replied neutrally, unsure why the conversation felt suddenly loaded with unspoken meaning. "I imagine it has," Quirrell murmured, his stutter momentarily vanishing. "Such power deserves proper guidance." The stutter returned as quickly as it had disappeared. "Do be careful, Potter. Ancient magic often carries unexpected consequences." With that cryptic warning, Quirrell continued on his way, leaving Harry with an intensified headache and a growing certainty that something was very wrong with the defense professor. The aura's protective response had been stronger than ever, gold light momentarily visible around Harry's hands before he consciously suppressed it. Shaking off the unsettling encounter, Harry continued toward Hagrid's hut, picking up his pace to make up for lost time. He found Ron and Hermione enjoying tea with Hagrid, engaged in animated conversation that halted when he entered. "There ya are, Harry." Hagrid greeted warmly. "Just telling Ron and Hermione about some the creatures in the forest." "How was your special trainin'?" "Educational," Harry replied, accepting the bucket-sized mug of tea Hagrid offered. "We were testing how the aura responds to different magical influences." "And?" Hermione prompted eagerly. Harry described the session, including the unexpected synergy between his father's invisibility cloak and the Omega aura. Ron whistled appreciatively at the descriptions of magical barriers bending to accommodate Harry's passage. "That's seriously advanced magic, that is," he commented. "Dad works with magical detection at the ministry sometimes, says even their best concealment charms can't fool some of those wards." It's the combination that seems special, Harry explained. The cloak and the aura together do things neither would manage alone. Makes sense, Hagrid nodded sagely. Magical artifacts with history behind them sometimes recognize each other, in a manner speaking. If that cloak's been in your family for generations, it might have its own kind memory. The conversation shifted to the Slytherin's political maneuvering, with Hagrid confirming much of what Percy had explained about the significance of Malfoy's seating arrangement and formal acknowledgement. Old customs, Hagrid grunted. From before the Ministry, when magical folk organized round power and bloodlines instead of laws. Some families never really gave up on those ways thinkin'. As afternoon faded toward evening, they bid Hagrid farewell and made their way back toward the castle for dinner. The grounds were peaceful in the golden light of sunset, a gentle breeze rustling the trees of the forbidden forest. We should probably warn you, Ron said as they walked. Fred and George are planning some sort of mock coronation in the common room tonight. Something about properly honoring the magical sovereign with an appropriately ridiculous ceremony. Harry groaned. Can't you talk them out of it? It might actually help, Hermione suggested thoughtfully. Using humor to defuse the tension around your status. If people can laugh about it, they might stop treating you so reverentially. Maybe, Harry conceded reluctantly. As long as they don't expect me to wear an actual crown. Ron's expression turned suspiciously innocent. About that. Dinner passed pleasantly enough, though Harry noticed continued subtle shifts in the political landscape of the Great Hall. The Slytherin seating arrangement remained altered, with Malfoy holding court among older students. At the Ravenclaw table, Moore sat surrounded by a diverse group that included students from all houses except Gryffindor, occasionally glancing Harry's way with calculating assessment. More surprisingly, Harry spotted several professors engaged in what appeared to be heated discussion at the staff table. Snape and McGonagall seemed to be disagreeing about something, with Dumbledore mediating between them. Quirrell was notably absent. As they finished eating, Percy approached their section of the table, looking uncharacteristically conspiratorial. Potter, he said quietly, I've heard concerning rumors about movement among certain politically connected alumni. Apparently, the Board of Governors is considering a special visit to Hogwarts to evaluate the unprecedented magical manifestation within school grounds. The Board of Governors? Hermione repeated. Can they do that? Percy nodded grimly. They technically oversee Hogwarts administration. Normally they defer to Dumbledore on magical matters, but the emergence of the Omega Aura has created quite a stir. Lucius Malfoy, Draco's father, chairs the board, and he's reportedly been in contact with the Department of Mysteries about your situation. Great, Harry muttered. More people treating me like a magical curiosity. It's more complicated than that, Percy cautioned. The Department of Mysteries studies the fundamental nature of magic. If they're getting involved, it suggests concerns beyond mere curiosity. This sobering news followed Harry back to Gryffindor Tower, where, as promised, Fred and George had organized an elaborate mock coronation that managed to be simultaneously ridiculous and surprisingly thoughtful. The twins had enchanted ordinary objects to create a throne of cushions, a crown fashioned from golden parchment, and a royal scepter that was actually a beater's bat wrapped in shimmering ribbon. To Harry's relief, the ceremony was played entirely for laughs, with increasingly absurd titles bestowed upon him, His Magnificent Magical Majesty, Sovereign of Spellwork, Emperor of Enchantment, and Duke of Detention-Worthy Mischief, and deliberately pompous speeches that had the entire common room howling with laughter. By accepting the ridiculous proceedings with good humor, even delivering an impromptu royal address promising fair taxation of chocolate frogs and weekends free of homework, Harry found himself more relaxed among his housemates than he had been since the sorting. As Hermione had predicted, the shared laughter seemed to puncture the reverent uncertainty that had surrounded him. The celebration was winding down when Professor McGonagall entered the common room, eyebrows rising at the sight of Harry wearing a paper crown and wielding a beribboned bat. To everyone's surprise, the corners of her mouth twitched in what might almost have been a smile. "Creative as always, Weasleys," she remarked dryly. "Perhaps next time you could channel your considerable talents towards something educational." "We maintain this is highly educational, Professor," Fred replied with a grin. "Practical lessons in magical politics and the importance of maintaining one's sense of humor in the face of absurdity." "Indeed," McGonagall said, her expression softening marginally. "Mr. Potter, the headmaster requests your presence in his office. Tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. "Yes, Professor," Harry nodded, removing the paper crown with a mixture of relief and curiosity. "Is everything all right?" "Nothing to concern yourself with tonight," she assured him. "Merely some developments that require discussion." Her gaze swept the common room. "Carry on with your coronation, but remember quiet hours begin at 10. After McGonagall departed, the celebration gradually dispersed as students drifted toward dormitories or homework. Harry found himself by the fire with Ron and Hermione, discussing Percy's warning and McGonagall's summons. "The Board of Governors getting involved can't be good," Ron worried. "Especially with Lucius Malfoy in charge. Dad says he still supports you-know-whose ideas, even if he pretended to come back to our side after the war." "And the Department of Mysteries," Hermione added thoughtfully. "They research the most profound magical questions, time, death, thought, space, and presumably the fundamental nature of magic itself. Which apparently now includes me," Harry sighed, slouching in his chair. "I just wanted to be a normal student." "Mate, you were never going to be normal," Ron pointed out pragmatically. "The boy who lived, remember. This aura business is just extra abnormality." Despite the circumstances, Harry found himself laughing. "Thanks for that perspective. Very comforting." As the common room emptied, Harry's thoughts drifted to the morning's meeting with Dumbledore. Whatever developments required discussion, he suspected they would further complicate his already complex situation. Between Noir's secret society, Malfoy's political maneuvering, the Board of Governors' interest, and the Department of Mysteries' involvement, the simple joy of discovering magic was increasingly overshadowed by adult machinations he barely understood. Yet beneath these concerns, Harry felt something unexpected, a growing confidence in his own capabilities. The Omega Aura wasn't just a burden or a target on his back, it was becoming an extension of himself, responding to his will and protecting his interests. Whatever challenges these developments might bring, he was no longer the helpless child who had lived in a cupboard under the stairs. Sunday morning dawned gray and drizzly, raindrops pattering against the dormitory windows. Harry woke early, the soft sounds of his roommates' breathing filling the quiet space as he lay contemplating the coming meeting with Dumbledore. After his encounter with Quirrell and Percy's warnings about the Board of Governors, he couldn't shake the feeling that matters were accelerating beyond anyone's control. At breakfast, he picked at his food while Hermione reviewed everything she'd uncovered about the Department of Mysteries and its historical involvement with rare magical phenomena. "They're incredibly secretive," she explained, barely touching her own breakfast in her enthusiasm. "Researchers there are called unspeakables because they're magically bound not to discuss their work. But there are references to their involvement whenever unprecedented magical manifestations occur." "Great," Harry muttered. "So I'm an unprecedented magical manifestation now." "To be fair," Ron pointed out through a mouthful of eggs, "you kind of are. The glowing golden aura thing isn't exactly standard wizard stuff." At precisely 10 minutes to 11, Harry bid his friends goodbye and made his way to the familiar gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office. Before he could even provide the password, the gargoyle sprang aside, revealing the spiral staircase beyond. "The headmaster is expecting you, Mr. Potter," the gargoyle intoned in a gravelly voice. Harry climbed the moving staircase, feeling the castle's magic responding to his presence more acutely than usual, a subtle harmonization that seemed to intensify whenever he visited Dumbledore's office. He knocked on the oak door at the top, receiving an immediate "enter" in response. The office appeared different today. Where normally Dumbledore's curious silver instruments whirred and puffed on their small tables, the space had been rearranged to accommodate a meeting area with several comfortable chairs arranged in a semicircle. Dumbledore himself stood by Fawkes's perch, stroking the phoenix's brilliant plumage. "Ah, Harry, right on time," he greeted warmly. "I trust Fred and George's coronation ceremony wasn't too traumatic." Harry grinned despite himself. "It was actually pretty funny. Helped break the tension in Gryffindor Tower." "Indeed. Humor often succeeds where serious discussion fails." Dumbledore gestured toward the arranged chairs. "Please, make yourself comfortable. We're expecting additional company shortly." Harry settled into one of the chairs, noting its unusual comfort. "Professor McGonagall mentioned developments that needed discussion." "Yes, though perhaps I should wait until our other participants arrive before." Here they are now." The office door opened to admit Professors McGonagall and Snape, followed by a witch and wizard Harry didn't recognize. The witch was middle-aged with intelligent eyes and streaks of silver in her dark hair, while the wizard appeared considerably older, with a wispy white beard and stooped shoulders that nonetheless suggested considerable vitality. "Harry," Dumbledore began, as everyone took seats, "may I introduce Unspeakable Croaker from the Department of Mysteries, and Madame Marchbanks, who represents the Wizarding Examinations Authority and serves as an independent magical assessor." Both visitors nodded politely to Harry, studying him with undisguised interest. "Mr. Potter," Croaker greeted, his voice surprisingly deep for his frail appearance. "A pleasure to finally meet you. Your magical manifestation has caused quite a stir within the department." "Indeed," added Madame Marchbanks. "Not since Albus himself demonstrated unprecedented transfiguration capabilities during his NEWT examinations have we observed such magical significance in one so young." Harry shifted uncomfortably under their scrutiny. "Thank you for coming, but I'm not sure why my situation requires Department of Mysteries involvement." Dumbledore settled into his own chair, blue eyes twinkling kindly. "A fair question, Harry. Perhaps we should begin with context." He turned to Croaker. "Would you care to explain the department's interest?" The old Unspeakable nodded. "Mr. Potter, the Department of Mysteries studies fundamental magical forces, those aspects of magic that transcend ordinary spellwork and touch upon the essential nature of magical reality itself. The Omega Aura is precisely such a phenomenon, a direct manifestation of primordial magical current, unfiltered by conventional magical constraints. We've observed similar manifestations precisely 3 times in recorded history," he continued. "Once during Merlin's confrontation with Morgan Le Fay, again during the founding of Hogwarts, and most recently during the magical cataclysm of 1612 that necessitated the formation of the Statute of Secrecy. In each case," Madame Marchbanks added, "the manifestation preceded significant magical upheaval and transformation of wizarding society." Harry frowned. "So you think I'm some kind of warning sign? That something bad is coming?" "Not necessarily bad," Dumbledore interjected gently. "But significant, certainly. The aura represents magic's own response to impending change, a concentration of magical potential to address coming challenges. The question that concerns the department," Croaker continued, "is whether this manifestation is reactive or predictive. Has the aura awakened in response to existing threats, or is it preparing for challenges not yet apparent? And that's why you're here. To figure that out?" Croaker nodded. "Partially. We also wish to offer assistance in understanding and developing your connection to this phenomenon. The headmaster has kept us apprised of your training progress, but there are resources and knowledge within the department that might prove beneficial." Harry glanced at Dumbledore, troubled by the revelation that his training sessions had been reported to the ministry. The headmaster met his gaze with calm reassurance. "I have shared only general information about your progress, Harry, nothing that compromises your privacy. The department's involvement was inevitable once the aura manifested so publicly." "There is another matter," McGonagall interjected, her voice carefully neutral. The Board of Governors has expressed concern about potential impacts on Hogwarts' magical infrastructure. Lucius Malfoy has proposed a specialized committee to monitor the situation. Harry's unease deepened. What kind of committee? One designed to assert board authority over your training and development, Snape answered, speaking for the first time. His dark eyes fixed on Harry with unusual intensity. A transparent attempt to establish influence over the aura's bearer. Precisely, Dumbledore agreed. Which is why I've invited Madame Marchbanks as an independent assessor. Her role with the examination authority places her outside both ministry and board politics, allowing for unbiased evaluation. Madame Marchbanks straightened in her chair. I've evaluated magical education for 60 years, Mr. Potter. My concern is solely the proper development of exceptional magical talent, not political agendas or departmental research priorities. The meeting continued for nearly an hour, with Croker outlining proposed assessments of Harry's abilities and Marchbanks establishing parameters for appropriate educational interventions. Throughout the discussion, Harry noticed Snape watching him with that same peculiar intensity, as if measuring his reactions against some private standard. There is one additional matter, Dumbledore said as the meeting began to conclude. The Unspeakables have uncovered historical references to artifacts that resonated particularly with the Omega Aura. Objects of power that, when wielded by an aura bearer, demonstrated unusual properties. Like my invisibility cloak? Harry asked. Precisely, Croker nodded, eyes widening with interest. You've already observed such resonance. Harry described how the cloak and aura had interacted during yesterday's training session, creating effects beyond normal invisibility. Croker listened with growing excitement, occasionally jotting notes on a small pad. Fascinating, the Unspeakable murmured when Harry finished. This confirms our theoretical models of aura artifact interaction. There may be other objects similarly responsive to your magical signature, tools that could help channel and focus the aura's capabilities. The department maintains a collection of magical artifacts whose purposes have been lost to time, Madame Marchbanks explained. Some may respond to the Omega Aura in ways that reveal their original functions. Are you suggesting Harry should visit the Department of Mysteries? McGonagall asked, frowning. Eventually, perhaps, Croker conceded. For now, we propose bringing select artifacts to Hogwarts for controlled testing under the headmaster's supervision. The discussion shifted to logistics and safeguards, with Dumbledore insisting on strict protocols for any artifacts brought into the school. Harry listened attentively, though his thoughts kept returning to the repeated historical pattern Croker had mentioned, that the aura's appearance always preceded major magical upheaval. As the meeting adjourned, Dumbledore asked Harry to remain behind while McGonagall escorted the visitors to the gates. Once they were alone, the headmaster regarded Harry with gentle concern. You seem troubled, Harry. It's a lot to process, Harry admitted. Everyone seems to think the aura means something bigger is coming, some magical crisis or transformation. But no one knows what exactly. Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. Uncertainty is often more challenging than clear danger. However, I believe there is wisdom in approaching this manifestation not as a burden of prophecy but as a gift of preparation. What do you mean? Whatever challenges lie ahead, the awakening of the Omega Aura has provided tools to meet them. Rather than dwelling on what might come, perhaps focus on developing the abilities you now possess. Dumbledore's blue eyes twinkled kindly. After all, the future arrives regardless of our anxiety about it. Harry considered this perspective. I guess that makes sense. It's just overwhelming sometimes. Understandably so. You've shouldered exceptional circumstances with remarkable grace, Harry. Dumbledore rose, moving to a cabinet behind his desk. Which reminds me, I have something for you. He returned with a small, ornate box carved from dark wood with intricate runes etched into its surface. This belonged to Godric Gryffindor, the last known bearer of the Omega Aura before yourself. It has remained in the headmaster's keeping since Hogwarts' founding. Harry accepted the box carefully, feeling its magic resonating with his own, an ancient harmony of compatible energies. The lid opened at his touch, revealing a simple golden ring bearing the Gryffindor crest. The Ring of Resonance, Dumbledore explained. Gryffindor created it to help focus and direct the aura's energy during the establishment of Hogwarts' foundational enchantments. I believe it rightfully belongs with the current bearer. Harry lifted the ring cautiously, feeling its magic singing in response to his touch. As he slipped it onto his finger, a brief flash of golden light suffused the metal, which reshaped itself slightly to fit him perfectly. It recognized you, Dumbledore observed with satisfaction. The ring contains no inherent power of its own, but serves as a conduit and focus for the aura's energy, allowing more precise control and direction. Harry felt the difference immediately, a subtle refinement in his awareness of the magical currents flowing through and around him. The Omega aura, normally a generalized warmth beneath his skin, seemed to organize itself more coherently, responding to his conscious direction with greater precision. "Thank you, sir," Harry said, genuinely moved by the gift. "I'll use it responsibly. I have every confidence that you will." Dumbledore's expression grew more serious. "One final matter, Harry. Professor Quirrell." Harry's attention sharpened. "You know something's wrong with him." It wasn't a question, but Dumbledore nodded nonetheless. "Your magical sensitivity has perceived what others might miss. I ask that you exercise particular caution around Professor Quirrell, especially if you find yourself alone in his presence." "Is he dangerous?" "Let us say that his sabbatical may have exposed him to influences beyond vampires." Dumbledore's typically twinkling eyes had grown grave. "The castle's protections and my own presence mitigate any immediate threat, but vigilance remains advisable." Harry nodded, the ring on his finger pulsing subtly with his heightened awareness. "I'll be careful." As he left Dumbledore's office, Harry found himself contemplating the accelerating complexity of his situation. In just over a week, he had gone from discovering he was a wizard to becoming the focus of ancient magical societies, ministry departments, and political maneuvering among the wizarding elite. The mysterious warning signs surrounding Quirrell added another layer of immediate concern to the abstract threats Croaker had hinted at. Yet despite these mounting pressures, Harry felt strangely centered. The Ring of Resonance seemed to ground his connection to the Omega aura, transforming overwhelming power into focused potential. Whatever challenges lay ahead, immediate or distant, he would face them with growing confidence in his own capabilities. He found Ron and Hermione waiting anxiously in the common room, eager to hear about his meeting with Dumbledore. As he recounted the discussion and showed them Gryffindor's ring, their expressions shifted from concern to fascination. "An actual artifact that belonged to Godric Gryffindor himself," Hermione breathed, examining the ring with academic reverence. "The historical significance alone is enormous, never mind its magical properties. Can you show us what it does?" Ron asked eagerly. Harry glanced around the crowded common room. "Probably not the best place for magical demonstrations. But I can feel the difference, it's like having a focusing lens for the aura." "We could go to that empty classroom on the third floor," Ron suggested. "The one with all the stacked desks." Hermione frowned. "That would technically be unsupervised magic outside of class. I think we're a bit beyond worrying about technical rule violations at this point," Harry pointed out wryly. "But maybe we should just head down to lunch first. I'm starving after that meeting." As they made their way to the Great Hall, Harry noticed something odd. Students from other houses seemed to be watching him with heightened interest, many whispering behind their hands as he passed. Even for his new status as magical sovereign, the attention seemed excessive. "Something's up," he muttered to Ron and Hermione. "Everyone's staring more than usual." "It's the Prophet," explained Neville Longbottom, who had fallen into step beside them. "Sunday edition. There's a whole feature about you and the Omega aura." "What?" Harry stopped in his tracks. "How?" "Someone leaked the story," Neville explained nervously. "There are quotes from unnamed sources within Hogwarts describing the sorting ceremony and your special training sessions. Harry's stomach dropped. Do you have a copy? Neville nodded, pulling a folded newspaper from his robes. I was actually coming to find you. Thought you should see it. The front page featured an enormous headline, Boy Who Lived Manifests Legendary Omega Aura, Ministry Experts Investigate First Appearance in Centuries. Below was a photograph of Harry from what must have been his first day of classes, looking small and bewildered as he navigated Hogwarts's corridors. The article itself was worse than Harry had feared, detailed descriptions of the sorting ceremony, speculation about his magical potential from anonymous magical historians, and most disturbingly, references to his private training sessions with Dumbledore and the other professors. While the facts were mostly accurate, they were framed in sensationalistic terms that portrayed Harry as either a messianic figure heralding magical renewal or a potential threat requiring ministry supervision. This is why the Department of Mysteries and Board of Governors got involved, Harry realized. The story's already public. The timing is suspicious, Hermione noted, scanning the article. This reads like it was written before your meeting this morning, but published to coincide with it. Someone's playing politics, Ron agreed grimly. Dad says the prophet never publishes anything this significant about ministry business without unofficial approval from someone high up. The Great Hall fell into hushed conversation as Harry entered, hundreds of eyes tracking his movement. At the Slytherin table, Malfoy appeared surprisingly displeased, his pale face tight with what might have been frustration rather than his usual smugness. Noir, meanwhile, observed the scene with calculating neutrality from the Ravenclaw table. At the staff table, Dumbledore's absence was conspicuous. McGonagall and Snape had apparently not yet returned from escorting the visitors, while Quirrell watched the unfolding scene with unusually focused attention, his customary nervous demeanor temporarily suspended. Harry forced himself to walk normally to the Gryffindor table despite the overwhelming scrutiny. Fred and George immediately closed ranks around him, creating a buffer between him and the staring crowds. Quality journalism as always from the prophet, Fred commented sarcastically, glancing at the newspaper. Our favorite part is where they described you as potentially the most powerful magical being in Britain, currently disguised as an undersized first year with unfortunate hair, George added with a grin. Despite himself, Harry laughed. At least they got the hair part right. As lunch progressed, the initial shock of the article began to wear off, and conversation in the hall gradually returned to normal volume and topics. Harry was just beginning to relax when the great double doors swung open dramatically, admitting a group of wizards in formal robes led by a tall man with long platinum blonde hair who could only be Draco Malfoy's father. The Board of Governors, Percy hissed from further down the table. That's Lucius Malfoy in front. The delegation marched purposefully toward the staff table, where Professor Flitwick, as the senior faculty member present, rose to greet them. After a brief, intense conversation, Flitwick summoned a house elf who disappeared with a crack, presumably to fetch Dumbledore. This can't be good, Ron muttered. Dad says Lucius Malfoy never shows up anywhere without an agenda. They're looking at you, Hermione whispered to Harry, who indeed found Lucius Malfoy's cold grey eyes fixed directly on him, assessing him with unconcealed interest. The uncomfortable scrutiny continued until Dumbledore arrived moments later, entering through a side door with McGonagall and Snape close behind. The headmaster greeted the delegation with perfect courtesy, though Harry noticed a certain coolness beneath his hospitable manner. After a brief exchange, Dumbledore led the board members out of the hall, but not before Lucius Malfoy made a deliberate detour that brought him directly to where Harry sat. Mr. Potter, he said, voice silky with practiced charm. Lucius Malfoy. An honor to make your acquaintance at last. Harry stood politely, acutely aware of the entire hall watching this exchange. The ring of resonance pulsed warmly on his finger, and he sensed something distinctly unpleasant in Malfoy's magical signature, a cold, slithering quality beneath the polished exterior. Mr. Malfoy, he acknowledged simply. I understand you've experienced quite a remarkable magical awakening, Malfoy continued, eyes moving to Harry's forehead before settling on the ring. His gaze sharpened. How interesting. Dumbledore has already provided you with a focusing artifact. Harry said nothing, disliking the calculating assessment in Malfoy's eyes. The Board of Governors has a responsibility to ensure exceptional magical talents are properly developed, Malfoy continued smoothly. I look forward to our discussions regarding your educational needs. The headmaster has been very helpful with my training, Harry replied pointedly. Something cold flashed in Malfoy's eyes before his diplomatic mask returned. Dumbledore is certainly experienced. But some magical traditions require more specialized guidance. My son Draco mentions you've been approached by several interested parties already. I'm still adjusting to basic magic, Mr. Malfoy. Advanced traditions can wait. Malfoy's smile remained fixed, though it didn't reach his eyes. Youth is often deceived by false modesty, Mr. Potter. The Omega Aura chose you for reasons beyond your understanding. Embracing your exceptional status would better serve magical society than pretending to be ordinary. Before Harry could respond, Dumbledore's voice called from the doorway. Lucius, the board awaits your leadership for our discussion. With a final assessing look, Malfoy inclined his head slightly. Until our next conversation, Mr. Potter. As Malfoy rejoined the departing delegation, Harry sank back onto the bench, suddenly aware he'd been holding his breath. Charming family, the Malfoys, Fred commented dryly. Did you feel that? Harry asked in a low voice. His magic felt wrong somehow. Dark wizards often leave magical traces, George explained, unusually serious. Dad says those who practice the dark arts during you-know-whose time carry a kind of magical taint, nothing visible to normal perception, but detectable to particularly sensitive magical cores. Which you certainly have, Fred added. The aura probably lets you sense all sorts of magical signatures others miss. Harry nodded, still disturbed by the encounter. The ring of resonance had indeed sharpened his magical perception, allowing him to detect nuances in Malfoy's magical aura that revealed more than the man's carefully constructed persona. What happens now? Hermione asked worriedly. Can the Board of Governors interfere with your training? They can try, Percy interjected, having moved closer during the exchange with Malfoy. The board technically oversees Hogwarts administration, but magical education itself falls under the headmaster's purview. It's a complex jurisdictional question. Harry sighed, appetite gone despite having eaten little. I think I need some air. Ron and Hermione immediately stood to accompany him. As they left the Great Hall, Harry became aware of someone following them, Draco Malfoy, who had detached himself from the Slytherin table and was now hurrying to catch up. Potter, he called, his voice lacking its usual drawl. A word? Harry paused, surprised by Malfoy's uncharacteristically direct approach. What is it, Malfoy? The Slytherin glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. That article in the Prophet, my father knew about it in advance. It wasn't his doing, but he received warning yesterday. Why are you telling me this? Harry asked, genuinely curious. Malfoy seemed to struggle with himself before answering. Political factions are forming around you, Potter. My father represents one approach, but he's not the only player positioning for influence. And you're helping me out of the goodness of your heart. A flash of Malfoy's typical sneer returned briefly. Hardly. I'm securing my own position. The formal acknowledgement I offered has magical significance beyond mere politics. If you truly bear the Omega Aura, certain old magics may consider us affiliated. Harry frowned, sensing there was more to this explanation than Malfoy was revealing. Affiliated how? Ask Granger, Malfoy replied with a nod toward Hermione. I'm sure she's read about traditional magical recognitions by now. Without further explanation, he turned and walked away, leaving Harry and his friends staring after him in confusion. What was that about? Ron wondered aloud. Hermione bit her lip thoughtfully. I think I might know. Traditional magical acknowledgement creates a kind of magical resonance between the parties. Not a binding contract exactly, but a recognition that magic itself records. So Malfoy's trying to establish some kind of magical connection to Harry? Ron asked incredulously. Not a connection so much as a position in relation to him, Hermione clarified. Old wizard hierarchies were reinforced by magical recognition ceremonies. By formally acknowledging Harry's aura, Malfoy placed himself in a recognized position within that magical framework. Great, Harry muttered. Another complication I didn't ask for. They made their way outside, finding a quiet spot beneath a beech tree overlooking the lake. The fresh air helped clear Harry's head, and the distance from the castle's watching eyes provided welcome relief from constant scrutiny. The article changes everything, Hermione observed after they'd settled on the grass. Before, the aura was just Hogwarts business. Now it's national news. Which means more people trying to use you, Ron added grimly. Dad says the ministry's always looking for ways to control powerful wizards, keep them working for the system instead of potentially against it. Harry twisted Gryffindor's ring absently on his finger, finding its warm weight oddly comforting. Dumbledore must have known this would happen eventually. That's probably why he accelerated my training and gave me this ring. To help you maintain independence, Hermione nodded. With better control over the aura, you're less dependent on others' guidance. They spent the afternoon by the lake, discussing strategies for navigating the increasing political complications while occasionally practicing small magical exercises with the Ring of Resonance. Harry discovered that the ring allowed him to channel the aura with much greater precision, creating tiny, controlled manifestations of golden light that he could shape into simple forms or direct toward specific targets. As evening approached, they reluctantly headed back toward the castle for dinner. They had nearly reached the entrance when Professor McGonagall intercepted them, her expression unusually tight. Mr. Potter, the headmaster requests your immediate presence in his office. Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley, you may accompany him if Mr. Potter wishes. The seriousness of her tone alarmed Harry. Has something happened, Professor? The Board of Governors has reached certain conclusions regarding your situation. The headmaster believes you should hear them directly rather than through intermediaries. The three friends exchanged worried glances before following McGonagall through the castle to the familiar gargoyle, which sprang aside without requiring a password. When they entered Dumbledore's office, they found a tense scene, the headmaster standing behind his desk, appearing outwardly calm but with a certain hardness in his blue eyes that Harry had never seen before. Seated in chairs before the desk were Lucius Malfoy and two other board members, along with a squat, toad-like witch in ministry robes whom Harry didn't recognize. "Ah, Mr. Potter," Dumbledore greeted, his voice perfectly courteous despite the obvious tension. "Thank you for joining us. I believe you've met Mr. Malfoy. Allow me to introduce Madame Selwyn and Mr. Knott of the Board of Governors, and Madame Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary to the Minister for Magic." The toad-like witch gave Harry a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Such a pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Potter. The minister is most concerned about your welfare, given these extraordinary circumstances." Harry nodded politely but said nothing, immediately disliking the falsely sweet tone of her voice. The Ring of Resonance pulsed warning against his skin, detecting something distinctly unpleasant in her magical signature, different from Malfoy's cold darkness but equally concerning, a sort of sickly sweet corruption that made him instinctively wary. "As I was explaining before Mr. Potter's arrival," Dumbledore continued, gesturing for Harry, Ron, and Hermione to sit in conjured chairs, "the educational development of Hogwarts students, even those with exceptional magical circumstances, falls firmly within the headmaster's jurisdiction." While normally that would be true, Malfoy replied smoothly, "The unprecedented nature of the Omega Aura's manifestation creates exceptional circumstances requiring exceptional oversight. The board believes a specialized educational committee should supervise Mr. Potter's magical development." "A committee naturally chaired by yourself, Lucius?" Dumbledore inquired mildly. "As chairman of the board, that would be appropriate," Malfoy acknowledged without a hint of embarrassment. along with representatives from the Department of Mysteries, the Department of Magical Education, and of course, the Minister's office. Hem, interjected Umbridge with her sickeningly sweet smile. The Minister feels most strongly that proper ministry oversight is essential in this matter. After all, the potential implications for wizarding security cannot be overstated. Harry felt a surge of anger at how openly they discussed controlling his development as if he weren't present. The Omega Aura responded to his emotion, a subtle golden glow momentarily visible around his hands before he consciously suppressed it, the ring of resonance helping him maintain control. Umbridge's eyes narrowed at the brief manifestation. You see. Unpredictable magical outbursts. Clearly specialized containment protocols may be necessary during the assessment phase. Containment? Harry spoke up, unable to remain silent. I'm not a magical creature to be contained, Madam Umbridge. Of course not, dear, she replied with that horrible false sweetness. Simply a figure of speech. We're all concerned with helping you manage this unexpected condition. It's not a condition, Harry responded firmly. And I'm already receiving excellent guidance from Professor Dumbledore and the Hogwarts staff. Lucius Malfoy's expression remained diplomatically neutral. No one questions Dumbledore's general magical expertise, Potter. However, the Omega Aura represents ancient magic of a specialized nature. The board believes a more diverse approach to your education would better serve both your development and the wider magical community's interests. Harry noticed how carefully Malfoy framed the board's intervention as beneficial to him rather than as a control mechanism. Before he could respond, Dumbledore spoke again. Perhaps we should be transparent about what's truly at stake, the headmaster suggested mildly. The Omega Aura represents significant magical potential, politically neutral in its natural state. Various factions now seek to influence its bearer toward their preferred philosophical frameworks before his own magical and ethical identity is fully formed. The direct acknowledgement of their political maneuvering caused both Malfoy and Umbridge to stiffen slightly, though neither abandoned their diplomatic facades. Really, Dumbledore, Umbridge simpered. Such cynicism hardly becomes you. The Ministry's sole concern is the proper development of Mr. Potter's extraordinary abilities within appropriate regulatory frameworks. And the board merely wishes to ensure his education incorporates traditional magical perspectives that modern curricula sometimes overlook, added Malfoy smoothly. Harry had heard enough. Drawing on the confidence that had been growing alongside his magical control, he stood, feeling the Omega Aura responding to his intent but keeping it carefully modulated through the ring of resonance. I appreciate everyone's concern for my education, he said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. But I came to Hogwarts to learn magic under Headmaster Dumbledore's guidance. I trust his judgment regarding my magical development. A commendable sentiment, Potter, Malfoy replied patronizingly, but at 11 years old, you hardly possess sufficient perspective to evaluate appropriate educational methodologies for your unique circumstance. Harry felt his temper flare, and with it, the Omega Aura surged beneath his skin. This time, he didn't completely suppress it, instead channeling it with deliberate control through the ring of resonance. A soft golden light emanated from him, not the explosive manifestation of uncontrolled magic but a controlled, steady radiance that filled the room with gentle power. I may be 11, Harry acknowledged, his voice quiet but carrying a resonance that commanded attention, but the aura chose me, not any committee or board. I believe that counts for something. The controlled display of magical presence silenced the room. Even Malfoy appeared momentarily taken aback by the deliberate, contained power Harry demonstrated. Umbridge's eyes widened with what might have been fear beneath her political mask, while the other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Dumbledore watched with quiet approval, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Well expressed, Harry. And an impressive demonstration of the progress you've already made in channeling the aura constructively. Harry allowed the golden light to fade gradually, maintaining perfect control throughout. I'm happy to meet with experts from the Department of Mysteries to understand this magic better, he continued. But my educational guidance should remain with Hogwarts staff, where it belongs. Malfoy recovered his composure quickly. The board's responsibility to Hogwarts cannot be negated by a student's preferences, however, dramatically expressed. Perhaps a compromise, suggested McGonagall, speaking for the first time since entering. Regular assessments by independent magical experts such as Madame Marchbanks, with quarterly reports to both the board and the Department of Mysteries, while maintaining the headmaster's primary educational authority. What followed was 30 minutes of intense negotiation, during which Harry marveled at Dumbledore's political skill. The headmaster conceded minor points while protecting his core authority over Harry's magical education, eventually securing an agreement that satisfied the various parties' need to claim involvement while preserving Hogwarts' independence. When the visitors finally departed, Dumbledore turned to Harry with that familiar twinkle restored to his blue eyes. A most illuminating meeting, wouldn't you agree? They all want to control the aura, Harry observed. Control, influence, direct, the terminology varies, but the intention remains consistent, Dumbledore agreed. What they fail to understand is that the Omega Aura itself resists external manipulation. It responds to your authentic character, Harry, not to imposed frameworks or agendas. That's why it chose him in the first place, Hermione suggested thoughtfully. Because Harry's character was compatible with its nature. Dumbledore beamed at her. Precisely, Miss Granger. The aura seeks bearers whose fundamental magical and ethical disposition aligns with its own intrinsic qualities, integrity, courage, and a certain healthy resistance to unjustified authority. Which explains why it didn't like Umbridge, Ron added with a grin. That woman gives me the creeps. Prudent instinct, Mr. Weasley, Dumbledore nodded gravely. Dolores Umbridge represents a perspective on magical authority that conflicts with the aura's inherent nature. Harry twisted the ring of resonance thoughtfully. Sir, when I controlled the aura just now, making it visible without letting it explode, it felt different than before. More like a conversation than a struggle. You're beginning to harmonize with it, Dumbledore confirmed. The ring helps focus that harmony, but the fundamental rapport is developing naturally between your consciousness and the aura's magical essence. As they prepared to leave, Harry remembered something. Professor Malfoy, told me the article wasn't his father's doing, but that he knew about it in advance. He also said something about our affiliation having magical significance. Dumbledore's expression grew thoughtful. Interesting. Young Mr. Malfoy's warning suggests internal divisions within traditional factions. Not all old families agree on how to approach your emergence. He stroked his beard contemplatively. As for the affiliation, he refers to ancient principles of magical recognition. By formally acknowledging the Omega Aura according to traditional protocols, he established a specific relationship recognized by old magic, not binding like a vow, but magically significant nonetheless. Is that dangerous? Hermione asked worriedly. Not inherently, Dumbledore assured them. Such recognitions create magical resonance patterns that facilitate certain forms of interaction but impose no obligations. Mr. Malfoy likely hopes to secure a recognized position within the magical hierarchy forming around Harry, while maintaining independence from his father's more direct approach. This complex political maneuvering among the Malfoys gave Harry much to think about as they made their way back to Gryffindor Tower. The day had been a cascade of revelations and confrontations, from the Prophet article to the Ministry's involvement to his own deliberate demonstration of controlled power in Dumbledore's office. Yet amid these mounting complications, Harry felt a growing clarity about his own position. The Omega Aura wasn't simply a power to be wielded or a prize to be controlled. It was a magical consciousness with its own nature and purpose, one that had chosen him as its bearer for specific reasons. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whether political machinations, mysterious threats, or the prophesied magical upheaval Croker had hinted at, Harry would face them not as a pawn in others' games but as an active participant with agency and purpose. The golden ring pulsed comfortingly against his finger as they climbed through the portrait hole, a physical reminder of his growing harmony with the ancient magic that had chosen him. Chapter 3, The Convergence of Powers. The weeks following the Board of Governors' intervention passed in a blur of classes, specialized training, and political maneuvering that seemed to intensify with each passing day. By Halloween, Harry had settled into an exhausting routine, standard lessons by day, advanced magical training by evening, and an ever-growing collection of observers documenting his progress under the compromise Dumbledore had negotiated. "Another day, another audience," Ron commented as they left the Great Hall after breakfast, nodding toward a stern-looking witch in formal ministry robes who had been watching Harry throughout the meal. "That's Madam Bones," Hermione identified quietly. "Head of Magical Law Enforcement. At least she's supposedly fair, unlike some of the others." Harry nodded, adjusting the ring of resonance that had become a permanent fixture on his finger. In the month since Dumbledore had given it to him, the ring had integrated further with his magical signature, enhancing his control over the Omega Aura to the point where flares of golden light now occurred only when he deliberately permitted them. "Double potions this morning," he reminded them, changing the subject from his unwanted observers. "Snape's been acting strange lately." It was true, the potions master's behavior toward Harry had undergone a subtle shift. The open contempt had faded, replaced by a clinical assessment that, while not friendly, lacked the personal animosity of their early interactions. During Harry's specialized training sessions, Snape had proven surprisingly helpful, offering insights into magical control techniques that complemented Dumbledore's more abstract guidance. The Halloween decorations lined the corridors as they made their way to the dungeons, floating jack-o'-lanterns grinning from alcoves, live bats fluttering in shadowy corners, and magical cobwebs that whispered ominous predictions when students passed beneath them. "You will face a momentous choice today," one web hissed as Harry walked under it, causing him to pause mid-stride. "Ignore it," advised a passing sixth year. "The decoration charms just spout random dramatic nonsense to create atmosphere." Harry nodded thanks, though something about the cobweb's message lingered uncomfortably in his mind. Since awakening the Omega Aura, he developed an increasing sensitivity to magical currents, not just spells and enchantments, but the subtler flows of magical intent that permeated Hogwarts. Sometimes, like now, those currents carried warnings his conscious mind couldn't fully interpret. The potions classroom was already filling with students when they arrived. Harry took his usual seat between Ron and Hermione, noticing Malfoy watching him with the calculated assessment that had replaced his earlier sneering hostility. Since their conversation after the Prophet article, the Slytherin had maintained a formal distance, neither friendly nor antagonistic, but clearly monitoring developments with keen interest. Professor Snape swept into the room, black robes billowing dramatically. "Today," he announced without preamble, "you will attempt a potion of elemental affinity, a diagnostic brew that reveals one's natural connection to magical elements. The instructions," he flicked his wand at the blackboard, "are precise. Follow them exactly." As students began gathering ingredients, Snape approached Harry's table, speaking in a low voice that wouldn't carry beyond their immediate vicinity. "Potter, your unique magical signature may cause unexpected reactions with this particular potion. Proceed with additional caution." Harry nodded, surprised by the warning. "Thank you, Professor." Snape's dark eyes studied him briefly before he moved away, leaving Harry wondering at this continued evolution in their relationship. Hermione raised questioning eyebrows, and Harry whispered Snape's warning as they began preparing ingredients. "That's actually considerate of him," she murmured, measuring dried salamander scales. "Elemental affinity potions are supposed to be quite reactive to the brewer's innate magical nature." The brewing process proved delicate and complex. As Harry followed the instructions, adding precisely measured components at specific intervals, he found himself unconsciously modulating the Omega Aura through the ring of resonance, instinctively adjusting his magical output to prevent it from overwhelming the sensitive mixture. Across the room, he noticed Malfoy working with methodical precision, occasionally glancing toward Harry's cauldron with undisguised curiosity. Harry had learned that despite his many flaws, Malfoy possessed genuine aptitude for potions beyond mere favoritism from Snape. As the brewing entered its final stage, Harry added 3 drops of phoenix tears, a rare ingredient Snape had reluctantly provided from his personal stores, and the potion immediately began to shimmer with an iridescent light. According to the instructions, the color should have settled into a single hue representing his primary elemental affinity, blue for water, red for fire, brown for earth, or silver for air. Instead, golden light erupted from the cauldron's surface, spiraling upward in luminous patterns that drew gasps from nearby students. The golden spirals expanded outward, not chaotically but with deliberate, complex geometry, forming interconnected patterns that resembled the magical diagrams Harry had studied during his special training sessions. Fascinating, Snape murmured, suddenly at Harry's side. Not a standard elemental alignment but a harmonic convergence pattern. The entire class had abandoned their own potions to stare at the golden display emanating from Harry's cauldron. Even Malfoy looked genuinely impressed rather than envious. "What does it mean, Professor?" Hermione asked, unable to contain her academic curiosity. "It indicates an affinity not with individual elements but with the fundamental magical currents that unite them," Snape explained, his voice taking on the clinical tone he adopted when discussing advanced magical theory. "Exceptionally rare." The last documented case was Albus Dumbledore himself. The golden patterns continued evolving above Harry's cauldron, becoming increasingly complex until, with a soft chime like crystal being struck, they suddenly coalesced into a single, brilliant symbol, a triangle containing a circle, intersected by a vertical line. Snape's expression changed instantly from academic interest to sharp concern. "Everyone back away from Potter's cauldron," he ordered. "Now." The students scrambled to obey as Snape drew his wand. Before he could cast any containment spell, however, the symbol pulsed once with blinding golden light, then dissipated into mist that was drawn inexorably toward Harry, absorbing into his skin like water into parched earth. A wave of sensations flooded through him, not pain but overwhelming awareness, as if every magical current in the castle had suddenly become visible to his perception. For a breathtaking moment, Harry could sense the layered enchantments woven into Hogwarts's very stones, the magical signatures of every person in the room, even the distant pulse of what felt like ley lines running deep beneath the castle foundations. Just as quickly, the enhanced perception receded to manageable levels, leaving him gasping with one hand braced against the workbench. The ring of resonance glowed warmly against his skin, having apparently helped modulate the magical influx. "Potter?" Snape's voice cut through his disorientation. "Are you cogent?" "Yes, sir," Harry managed, straightening. "I'm all right." It was just, intense. Snape studied him with narrow-eyed assessment before turning to address the class. "Complete your potions according to the instructions. Potter, remain after class." The remainder of the lesson passed in a haze for Harry. The lingering effects of whatever had happened left him hyper-aware of magical currents he'd previously only vaguely perceived. He could sense the difference between Hermione's organized, methodical magic and Ron's more intuitive, erratic pattern. More disturbingly, he found himself perceiving deeper aspects of his classmates' magical signatures, emotional undertones, natural affinities, even hints of future potential. When the bell rang signaling the end of class, Harry remained seated while Ron and Hermione reluctantly departed with promises to wait in the corridor. As the classroom emptied, Snape closed the door with a wave of his wand and turned to Harry with uncharacteristic directness. "What you experienced, Potter, was a magical resonance cascade, a phenomenon that occurs when a catalyst potion encounters a magical signature of exceptional compatibility with fundamental forces." Snape's dark eyes studied him intently. "The symbol that appeared has significant historical associations." "What kind of associations?" Harry asked, still feeling the strange heightened awareness pulsing at the edges of his perception. "It's known as the Deathly Hallows symbol," Snape replied after a brief hesitation. "Associated with 3 legendary magical artifacts of considerable power. The headmaster will need to be informed immediately." Harry frowned. "Is it dangerous?" "The symbol, or what happened with the potion?" "Not inherently dangerous, no. but potentially significant. Snape regarded him with that same clinical assessment that had replaced his earlier hostility. The Omega Aura appears to be evolving, Potter. Integrating with your magical core in ways that even historical precedent doesn't fully anticipate. Harry absorbed this information, twisting the ring of resonance absently. Sir, can I ask you something? About my mother? The question clearly caught Snape off guard. A brief flash of emotion, complex and painful, crossed his typically impassive features before vanishing behind carefully reconstructed composure. What about her? He asked, his voice neutral but lacking its usual edge. You mentioned once that she had exceptional magical intuition. Did she ever show signs of unusual magical perception? Anything like what's happening to me, even on a smaller scale? Snape was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice had a quality Harry had never heard from him before, something almost gentle beneath the controlled precision. Your mother possessed extraordinary magical sensitivity, particularly regarding potions. She could perceive interactions between ingredients that weren't documented in any text. Sometimes she would change brewing procedures based on intuition alone, and invariably, her adjustments proved superior to standard methods. Harry listened with rapt attention, hungry for any information about his parents, especially his mother, who was mentioned less frequently than his father in others' reminiscences. Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick have mentioned my father's transfiguration and charm work, he ventured, but no one except you has told me much about my mother's magical abilities. Lily Evans was the most naturally gifted potions student I encountered in my time at Hogwarts, Snape stated flatly. Had circumstances been different, she might have become a potions innovator of historical significance. The unexpected praise from Snape, who rarely acknowledged excellence in anyone, stunned Harry into momentary silence. Something in the professor's tone suggested personal knowledge beyond mere academic observation, but before Harry could formulate another question, Snape seemed to recollect himself. You should report to the headmaster's office, he said, his voice returning to its usual clipped efficiency. The magical resonance cascade merits immediate attention, particularly given the specific symbol manifested. Harry nodded, gathering his belongings. Thank you, Professor. For telling me about my mother. Snape gave a curt nod but said nothing further as Harry left to rejoin Ron and Hermione in the corridor. What happened? Hermione asked anxiously once they were headed toward Dumbledore's office. That symbol that appeared, I've seen it somewhere before. Snape called it the Deathly Hallows symbol, Harry explained, recounting their conversation. He thinks the Omega Aura is evolving somehow, integrating with my magic in new ways. The Deathly Hallows, Ron repeated, looking surprisingly knowledgeable. That's from an old wizarding children's story, The Tale of the Three Brothers. Mum used to read it to us. 3 magical objects supposedly created by Death himself. A children's story? Harry frowned. Why would Snape look so concerned about a symbol from a fairy tale? Some wizarding stories have roots in actual magical history, Hermione suggested. Like how Muggle legends about dragons or unicorns are based on real creatures. They reached the gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office, which sprang aside without requiring a password as it now did consistently for Harry. The spiral staircase carried them upward, depositing them before the familiar oak door that swung open before Harry could knock. Ah, Harry, Dumbledore greeted from behind his desk. Professor Snape sent word about the incident in potions. Please, all of you, come in. The headmaster's office appeared different today. Many of the delicate silver instruments that normally whirred and puffed on their tables had been replaced by ancient-looking artifacts arrayed in a careful pattern across Dumbledore's desk. At the center lay a worn book bound in faded leather, open to a page displaying the same triangular symbol that had appeared above Harry's cauldron. I understand you experienced a magical resonance cascade, Dumbledore said once they were seated. A rare phenomenon, particularly for one so young. Harry nodded, describing the experience, the golden patterns, the symbol's appearance, and the momentary expansion of his magical perception. Dumbledore listened intently, his blue eyes unusually serious behind his half-moon spectacles. "Most interesting," he murmured when Harry finished. "The timing is particularly significant, occurring as it does on Samhain, what Muggles call Halloween, a day when magical boundaries traditionally thin." "Professor Snape mentioned the Deathly Hallows," Harry prompted. He seemed concerned about the symbol appearing. "With good reason," Dumbledore acknowledged. "The symbol represents 3 legendary magical artifacts of immense power, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Cloak of Invisibility. Together, they are said to make their possessor the Master of Death." Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged startled glances at this ominous title. "Master of Death?" Harry repeated. "That sounds alarming." "Certainly," Dumbledore agreed with a small smile. "Though perhaps not in the way you might initially imagine. Death mastery in the original context referred not to control over death itself, but to transcendence of mortality's limitations, acceptance rather than conquest." "Sir," Hermione began hesitantly, "is it just a coincidence that Harry's invisibility cloak and this symbol appeared so close together? Could his cloak be—" Dumbledore's eyes twinkled briefly. "A logical connection, Miss Granger. Harry's cloak is indeed exceptional, far surpassing ordinary invisibility cloaks in both quality and longevity. Whether it is the legendary cloak of the Hallows Tale, however, remains a matter of scholarly debate." Harry looked down at the ring on his finger, then back at Dumbledore. "Professor, these past weeks, the Ring of Resonance has been helping me control the aura, but sometimes it feels like it's doing more than that, like it's guiding me toward something." "Perception both acute and accurate," Dumbledore nodded approvingly. "Gryffindor created the Ring of Resonance not merely as a control mechanism but as a compass of sorts, attuned to magical currents that exist beyond ordinary perception." "What's happening to me?" Harry asked directly. "First the aura, then the connection to the cloak, now this symbol and expanded perception. It feels like I'm being prepared for something." Dumbledore regarded Harry for a long moment, his expression growing somber. "I believe you are, Harry. The Omega Aura has historically manifested in times of significant magical convergence, periods when multiple magical currents align to create the potential for fundamental transformation of our world." "Convergence," Harry repeated, remembering Snape's description of his potion results. "Professor Snape used that word too, harmonic convergence pattern." "Indeed. A precise description of what appears to be occurring." Dumbledore leaned forward, his manner becoming more direct. "Harry, the appearance of the Hallows symbol in conjunction with the Omega Aura suggests that ancient magical forces are coalescing around you, forces that transcend ordinary wizarding concerns." "That doesn't sound like something I signed up for," Harry said with a weak attempt at humor. Dumbledore's eyes softened with understanding. "No child should bear such responsibility. Yet magic itself seems to have chosen you as a nexus point for these converging forces. The question becomes not whether you will face this confluence, but how." Ron cleared his throat. "Sir, does all this have anything to do with you-know-who? Harry's already faced him once as a baby." "A perceptive question, Mr. Weasley. While I cannot claim complete understanding of these mystical connections, I believe Voldemort's attack on Harry as an infant may have catalyzed magical processes that were already latent within him, processes now accelerating as we approach a critical magical threshold." The mention of Voldemort sent a chill through Harry, accompanied by a pulse of warmth from the Ring of Resonance, as if it were responding protectively to the mere mention of the Dark Wizard's name. "Professor," Hermione spoke up, her analytical mind clearly working through the implications, "if these magical convergences are cyclical, with the Omega Aura appearing during critical periods, are there historical records of what happened during previous manifestations?" "Limited but illuminating," Dumbledore confirmed. "During Merlin's time, the convergence led to the establishment of the first formal magical community in Britain. With Godric Gryffindor, it resulted in the founding of Hogwarts and the creation of magical education as we now know it. The 1612 manifestation precipitated the International Statute of Secrecy. So each time," Harry said slowly, it led to a fundamental change in how wizards lived or organized themselves. Precisely, Dumbledore nodded. Each convergence represented a critical turning point in wizarding history, adaptation to new circumstances that required transformation of existing magical structures. And you think we're approaching another turning point now? Hermione asked. The signs suggest as much, Dumbledore confirmed. Though its precise nature remains unclear. Harry absorbed this sobering information, feeling the weight of historical parallels pressing upon him. Before he could formulate his next question, however, a strange sensation swept through him, a surge of warning from the Omega aura so intense that he gasped audibly, the ring of resonance flaring with golden light. Harry? Ron asked worriedly. What's wrong? Something's happening, Harry managed, the enhanced perception from the potions incident suddenly returning full force. He could sense magical currents throughout the castle shifting, realigning around a disturbance emanating from the lower floors. Something's wrong in the castle. As if confirming his words, a silver spectral cat, a Patronus, leapt through the office wall, speaking with Professor McGonagall's voice. Albus, security breach near the third-floor corridor. The protections are under assault. Dumbledore rose immediately, his casual demeanor replaced by focused intensity. I must investigate this disturbance. You three will return to Gryffindor Tower immediately. Sir, Harry said, standing as well, the ring of resonance pulsing urgently against his skin. I can feel what's happening. Whatever's attacking the third-floor protections, it feels wrong, twisted somehow. Dumbledore regarded Harry with sharp assessment. Your enhanced perception may provide valuable insight. However, the potential danger is already centered on me anyway, Harry finished. Professor, the aura is practically pulling me toward whatever's happening. I think I'm meant to be there. A brief internal struggle played across Dumbledore's features before he nodded decisively. Very well, Harry. You may accompany me, but you will follow my instructions exactly. Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger, please return to, they're coming too, Harry interrupted with unexpected firmness. We stay together. Something in Harry's tone, a resonance of authority that seemed to emanate from the aura itself, gave Dumbledore pause. After a moment, the headmaster inclined his head in acquiescence. As you wish. But all of you must exercise extreme caution and remain behind me at all times. They hurried from the office and through the corridors, Dumbledore setting a pace that belied his apparent age. As they descended through the castle, Harry's magical sensitivity continued intensifying. He could perceive magical currents flowing through Hogwarts like a vast, intricate circulatory system, and something was interfering with that flow near the forbidden third-floor corridor. Professor, Harry said as they rounded a corner, I can feel two magical signatures down there, one feels like Professor Quirrell, but, wrong somehow. Corrupted. The other is older, darker. Dumbledore's stride faltered momentarily. You can distinguish individual signatures at this distance. Since the potions incident, yes, Harry confirmed. And whatever's happening, it's affecting the castle's core enchantments. They arrived at the third-floor corridor to find Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape already there, wands drawn as they confronted a complex magical barrier blocking the entrance to the forbidden area. The barrier shimmered with sickly purple light, magical symbols crawling across its surface in unnatural patterns. Albus, McGonagall greeted tersely, someone has activated advanced containment wards from within. They're attempting to isolate this section from Hogwarts's main protective network. Quirrell, Snape stated flatly, dark eyes flicking briefly to Harry. The magical signature is disguised but identifiable. Indeed, Dumbledore agreed, examining the barrier with focused intensity. And not working alone, I suspect. He turned to Harry. What do you perceive beyond this barrier? Harry focused his enhanced senses, the ring of resonance warming as it amplified his perception. Two distinct magical presences moving deeper beneath us. There's something valuable down there, I can feel its magical resonance. They're pursuing it. The stone, McGonagall breathed, exchanging significant glances with Dumbledore. "It appears our suspicions were correct, Minerva," Dumbledore said grimly. "Though the timing is unexpected." "Sir," Harry asked, "what's down there that's worth all this?" Dumbledore hesitated only briefly. "The Philosopher's Stone, an artifact of immense alchemical power, capable of transforming base metals to gold and producing the elixir of life, which grants immortality." "And you know who wants it," Ron concluded, face paling beneath his freckles. "A logical assessment, Mr. Weasley," Dumbledore confirmed. "Now, we must breach this barrier without triggering its collapse protocols." Harry stepped forward, drawn by an intuition he couldn't fully articulate. "Professor, I think the aura can interact with it. These wards, they're powerful, but they're still magical constructs." Dumbledore studied him briefly before nodding. "A theory worth testing. What do you propose?" "Not disruption," Harry said, the knowledge flowing through him from some deeper understanding. "Harmonization." He approached the shimmering barrier, extending one hand with the ring of resonance prominent. Instead of pushing against the magical construct, he allowed the Omega aura to flow gently around it, seeking resonant frequencies within the barrier's magical structure, points where its energy patterns could be subtly aligned with his own. Golden light emanated from the ring, interweaving with the purple barrier in complex patterns. Where they touched, the sickly purple lightened, shifting through the spectrum until sections began glowing with the same golden hue as the aura. Harry felt resistance. Whoever had created this barrier had tied it to anti-harmonization principles specifically designed to resist standard magical countermeasures. But the Omega aura was far from standard. It slipped between the magical formulas comprising the barrier, not breaking them but gently redirecting them, like a stream finding its way around obstacles rather than destroying them. "Extraordinary," Snape murmured, watching the methodical transformation of the barrier. "He's reconfiguring the magical substrate without collapsing the overall construct." After several tense minutes, the entire barrier had shifted from purple to gold, its magical signature now harmonic with the aura rather than oppositional. With a final gesture from Harry, it dissolved into golden motes that were absorbed into Hogwarts' stonework. "Well done, Harry," Dumbledore said, moving immediately to the revealed entrance. "Now stay behind me. Whatever awaits below is likely prepared for my arrival, but not necessarily for yours." They descended through a trapdoor into darkness, Dumbledore conjuring magical light that revealed a series of chambers, each containing evidence of protective measures that had already been breached: a massive unconscious three-headed dog, a room full of flying keys with broken wings, a partially destroyed giant chess set. "They're moving quickly," McGonagall observed tensely. "Too quickly," Snape agreed. "These protections should have delayed even a skilled wizard for hours." As they progressed, Harry's magical sensitivity continued to sharpen. He could feel the two magical signatures ahead growing more distinct, Quirrell's familiar presence but unnaturally distorted, and intertwined with it, something ancient and malevolent that sent cold shivers through the Omega aura. The final chamber contained a wall of black flames blocking their path. Snape approached it, expression grim. "My contribution to the protections," he explained. "A logic puzzle with a potion solution. But it's been tampered with, all the potions have been altered." "Can we bypass it?" McGonagall asked. Harry stepped forward again, guided by that same intuition. "I think the aura can create a passage, not by extinguishing the flames but by harmonizing with them temporarily." "Proceed," Dumbledore nodded, watching closely. This time, Harry extended both hands, the ring of resonance gleaming. Golden light flowed from his fingers toward the black flames, not confronting them directly but enveloping them in spiraling patterns. Where the aura touched the flames, they didn't extinguish but instead transformed, becoming golden fire that curved outward to create an arched passage. "Quickly," Harry urged, maintaining concentration. "I can hold this open, but not indefinitely." Dumbledore led the way through the golden archway, followed by McGonagall and Snape. Ron and Hermione passed through next, with Harry maintaining the passage until they were safely across before following himself. The moment he released his concentration, the flames snapped back to their original black form, sealing the chamber behind them. "Remarkable adaptive application," Snape commented, giving Harry an assessing look that almost contained approval. Beyond lay a large circular chamber dominated by a magnificent mirror in an ornate gold frame. Before it stood Professor Quirrell, his back to them, purple turban stark against his robes. He appeared to be speaking to his own reflection, but in a voice that wasn't his own, higher, colder, and carrying a quality of ancient malice that made the Omega aura flare protectively within Harry. "Must be another way to retrieve it," Quirrell was saying in that unnatural voice. "The mirror resists conventional extraction methods." "I believe that's quite enough, Quirinus," Dumbledore called, his wand raised. "Or should I address the one who speaks through you?" Quirrell turned slowly, and Harry gasped at the transformation. Gone was the nervous, stuttering professor. His face appeared waxy and rigid, eyes glowing with reddish light that was distinctly inhuman. When he spoke, his voice remained that high, cold tone that seemed to emanate not from his throat but from somewhere behind him. "Dumbledore," he hissed. "Always interfering. But you're too late, my servant has nearly secured the stone." "Tom," Dumbledore replied calmly. "I had hoped you would not risk such a direct incursion." Harry's scar suddenly exploded with pain so intense he staggered, the ring of resonance flaring with golden light as the Omega aura responded defensively. In that moment of connection, he understood with horrifying clarity what he was sensing. "Voldemort," he gasped. "He's possessing Quirrell somehow." Quirrell's face twisted in a terrible smile. "The boy is perceptive." "Yes, Potter, I have been with you all year, watching from behind Quirrell's pitiful countenance, biding my time." His gaze fixed on Harry with malevolent intensity. "And you, manifesting power beyond your comprehension. The Omega aura. How fitting that I shall claim both it and the stone in one masterstroke." "You cannot claim the aura, Tom," Dumbledore stated with quiet certainty. "It chooses its bearer according to principles beyond your grasp." "All magic can be conquered through sufficient will," Voldemort hissed through Quirrell's lips. "The boy is merely an unworthy vessel for power that rightfully belongs to the greatest wizard who ever lived." Harry felt rage building within him, not just at the threat, but at the dismissive contempt in Voldemort's tone. The Omega aura surged in response to his emotion, golden light emanating from his skin in pulsing waves. The ring of resonance grew warm against his finger, helping him channel the power rather than letting it explode uncontrolled. "The aura chose me," Harry stated, his voice carrying unexpected resonance that seemed to reverberate throughout the chamber. "Not you. There's a reason for that." Voldemort's borrowed eyes narrowed. "Brave words from a child who barely understands what he carries. But I have studied the Omega aura's historical manifestations extensively. I know its secrets, its vulnerabilities, how it can be extracted and repurposed by one with sufficient knowledge." In a lightning-fast movement, Quirrell's body lunged toward Harry, hands outstretched with unnatural speed. Dumbledore's shield charm materialized instantly between them, but Voldemort shattered it with a wandless gesture of such power that even McGonagall gasped in shock. "Protego Maxima!" Snape shouted, conjuring a secondary shield as McGonagall pulled Ron and Hermione behind a stone pillar for protection. Harry stood his ground, the Omega aura responding instinctively to the threat. As Quirrell's possessed form reached for him, golden light erupted between them, forming a barrier that Voldemort's magic crashed against like waves against a cliff. "Impossible," Voldemort hissed, genuine surprise in his voice as his magical assault failed to penetrate Harry's protective aura. "The protection that defeated you 10 years ago remains," Dumbledore explained, moving to flank Quirrell's possessed form. "Enhanced now by the Omega aura's natural defensive properties." Voldemort's borrowed face contorted with fury. "There are other ways to claim what I seek." He whirled suddenly toward Ron and Hermione, who remained partially exposed despite McGonagall's protection. "Perhaps through leveraging the boy's unfortunate attachments." A jet of sickly green light, the unmistakable signature of the killing curse, erupted from Quirrell's hand toward Ron and Hermione. McGonagall moved with remarkable speed, transfiguring the stone floor into a rising wall that intercepted the deadly spell, but the impact shattered her protective barrier, sending stone fragments flying across the chamber. Harry felt something fundamental shift within him, a protective rage that transcended ordinary emotion. The Omega Aura responded, no longer merely defensive but actively assertive, golden light streaming from his outstretched hands toward his friends. The light enveloped Ron and Hermione in a protective cocoon seconds before a second curse from Voldemort struck where they had been standing. "You cannot protect everyone, Potter," Voldemort taunted, turning his assault toward the professors, unleashing a barrage of dark magic that forced even Dumbledore into a defensive stance. Harry felt the ring of resonance pulsing against his skin, guiding him toward something, a deeper connection with the castle itself. Without fully understanding how he knew to do it, he pressed his palm against Hogwarts' stone floor, channeling the Omega Aura directly into the foundation. Golden light spread outward from his hand in geometric patterns, racing along the seams between stones, climbing walls and pillars until the entire chamber was illuminated by a network of glowing lines. The castle responded to his call, ancient protective enchantments recognizing the aura's signature from when Gryffindor had first woven them into Hogwarts' very fabric. "What is this?" Voldemort demanded, his borrowed voice showing the first hints of genuine alarm. "The castle remembers," Harry said, knowledge flowing into him from the magical connection. "Hogwarts recognizes the Omega Aura, and rejects your presence within its walls." The golden lines converged toward Quirrell's possessed form, encircling him in a tightening web of light. Voldemort fought against the constraint, dark magic lashing out in increasingly desperate patterns, but each attack was absorbed and neutralized by the castle's awakened protections. "This is impossible," he snarled, red eyes wide with disbelief. No mere boy could command Hogwarts' foundational magic. "Not commanding," Harry corrected, maintaining the connection through the ring of resonance. "Requesting. The castle protects its own." Dumbledore stepped forward, wand moving in complex patterns as he added his considerable power to the containment effort. "It appears, Tom, that you have once again underestimated the magic you cannot understand, the power of harmonious magical alliance rather than domination." Trapped within the tightening golden web, Voldemort's possession of Quirrell began to destabilize. Dark, oily smoke leaked from beneath the purple turban, attempting to escape the confinement. Harry gasped as he perceived what was happening. Voldemort's spirit was abandoning its host, sacrificing Quirrell to preserve itself. "He's trying to escape," Harry warned. Snape and McGonagall immediately began casting containment charms aimed at the escaping darkness, but Voldemort's essence proved elusive, slipping between their magical constraints like smoke through a sieve. Harry felt the Omega Aura responding to this new threat, the ring of resonance growing almost painfully hot against his skin. Acting on pure instinct, he directed a concentrated beam of golden light directly at the escaping shadow, not attempting to contain it but to force a confrontation, to prevent Voldemort from simply abandoning the field. The moment the aura made contact with Voldemort's essence, Harry's scar erupted in blinding pain. A psychic connection formed between them, unwanted and agonizing, as if the aura had temporarily bridged the gap between his consciousness and Voldemort's disembodied spirit. Through this torturous connection, fragmentary images flooded into Harry's mind, a diary with bleeding pages, a golden cup emanating darkness, a tarnished diadem hidden among countless discarded objects, a heavy gold locket with an ornate S, a ring set with a cracked black stone bearing a familiar symbol. With a howl of rage and fear, Voldemort's essence tore itself away from the connection, abandoning Quirrell entirely and fleeing through the chamber wall in a streak of darkness too swift for even Dumbledore's countermeasures to intercept. Quirrell collapsed to the ground, body shuddering violently as Voldemort's possession ended. Harry staggered backward, overwhelmed by the psychic backlash, but Ron and Hermione rushed to his side, supporting him before he could fall. "Harry!" Hermione cried, face pale with concern. "Are you all right?" "I saw." He began, struggling to organize the chaotic images that had flooded his mind. "When the aura touched him, I saw things, objects he values, hid, protected." "Rest, Harry," Dumbledore instructed gently, moving to examine Quirrell's trembling form. "We will discuss what you witnessed once you've recovered." Snape knelt beside Quirrell, checking vital signs with clinical efficiency. "He's dying," the potion's master reported dispassionately. "The possession was too complete, his body is shutting down without the dark magic sustaining it." McGonagall conjured a stretcher beneath the failing professor. "We should get him to the hospital wing immediately, though I fear Poppy can do little for such damage." As the professors arranged for Quirrell's transport, Harry's attention was drawn to the ornate mirror still standing untouched in the center of the chamber. Something about its magical signature called to him, a resonance that hummed in harmony with the Omega Aura. "The mirror of Erised," Dumbledore explained, noting Harry's interest. "I enchanted it to protect the Philosopher's Stone, to yield the stone only to one who wanted to find it but not use it." Harry approached the mirror cautiously, the ring of resonance warming against his skin as he drew near. In the reflection, he saw himself, not alone, but surrounded by indistinct figures that seemed to shimmer at the edges of perception, as if existing partially in another realm. As he watched, his reflection smiled and reached into its pocket, withdrawing a blood-red stone that pulsed with inner light. The reflected Harry raised the stone in one hand and the ring of resonance in the other, bringing them together in a gesture of magical synthesis. In the real world, Harry felt something heavy drop into his actual pocket. He reached in and withdrew the Philosopher's Stone, a ruby-red crystal that hummed with ancient alchemical power. "It gave it to me," he said, showing the stone to Dumbledore. "But I wasn't even thinking about finding it specifically." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled behind his spectacles. "The mirror responds to heart's desire, Harry. Perhaps in your case, the desire to protect the stone from Voldemort was sufficient to meet the requirement." Harry studied the stone in his palm, feeling its magical resonance harmonizing with the Omega Aura in unexpected ways. "There's something about its magical structure, it's similar to the aura in some way I can't quite define." A perceptive observation, Dumbledore nodded. The Philosopher's Stone represents one of the highest achievements of directed magical transformation, the alchemical pinnacle of changing one thing into another. The Omega Aura, in its essence, is transformation magic in its purest form. Before Harry could explore this connection further, Quirrell's body convulsed violently on the stretcher, then went ominously still. Snape checked for signs of life, then shook his head grimly. "He's gone," the potion's master confirmed. The trauma of possession was too severe. A somber silence fell over the chamber, broken eventually by Dumbledore's gentle voice. "Let us return to the upper levels. There is much to discuss, but this is not the place." As they made their way back through the chambers toward the trapdoor, Harry found himself processing the extraordinary events that had just unfolded. He had faced Voldemort directly for the first time since that fateful night as an infant, and had not only survived but driven him away, preventing him from obtaining the Philosopher's Stone. Yet the victory felt incomplete. The Dark Wizard had escaped, and the fragmentary visions Harry had glimpsed during their momentary connection suggested Voldemort had other resources, other plans, and objects of significance that somehow connected to his continued survival. The journey back to the castle proper passed in a blur of exhaustion and lingering magical resonance. By the time they reached Dumbledore's office, news of some disturbance had clearly spread throughout Hogwarts, as evidenced by the crowd of concerned staff gathered outside the headmaster's door. "Minerva, please inform the staff that the situation is under control," Dumbledore requested. "Severus, escort Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger to the hospital wing for evaluation. Magical backlash can have delayed effects." "I'm staying with Harry," Ron stated firmly, Hermione nodding in agreement beside him. Dumbledore studied them briefly before nodding. "Very well. A loyalty that has already proven its value today should not be dismissed." Once inside the office, with the door secured behind them, Dumbledore carefully placed the Philosopher's Stone on his desk, examining it thoughtfully before addressing Harry. "What you experienced today, the connection with Voldemort's consciousness, is most concerning. Can you describe what you saw?" Harry concentrated, trying to organize the chaotic impressions that had flooded into him during that brief, painful connection. "Objects, 5 of them, I think. Each one felt important to him, protected, hidden. And each one had a similar magical signature, dark, twisted, like fragments of something broken. Dumbledore's expression grew increasingly grave as Harry described each object from his vision. When Harry mentioned the ring with its cracked black stone bearing the Deathly Hallows symbol, the headmaster's face paled visibly. "This confirms my worst suspicions," Dumbledore said quietly. "What you perceived, Harry, are objects of the darkest magic, receptacles for fragments of Voldemort's soul, created through acts of deliberate murder." "Fragments of his soul?" Hermione repeated, looking horrified. "Is that even possible?" "Through magic so evil it is rarely even named," Dumbledore confirmed. "Horcruxes, objects containing pieces of a wizard's soul, anchoring them to life even if their body is destroyed. That's how he survived when the killing curse rebounded," Harry realized. "He didn't die because pieces of his soul were preserved elsewhere." "Precisely," Dumbledore nodded, his expression somber. "I had suspected something of this nature, but confirmation of multiple Horcruxes is truly disturbing news. It suggests Voldemort has gone further down this dark path than any wizard in recorded history." Ron looked pale beneath his freckles. "So even though we stopped him getting the stone, he cannot be truly defeated until these soul fragments are destroyed," Dumbledore confirmed. "Though your vision, Harry, provides invaluable intelligence regarding their nature and possible locations." Harry twisted the ring of resonance absently, processing this disturbing revelation. "There's something else, Professor. When the aura connected with Voldemort's essence, it felt like recognition. As if the aura had encountered this specific dark magic before. Historical accounts suggest the Omega Aura has manifested during previous magical crises involving soul magic," Dumbledore mused. "Perhaps this is why it has awakened now, to counter this particular magical abomination." The Philosopher's Stone sitting on Dumbledore's desk suddenly pulsed with ruby light, as if responding to their conversation. Simultaneously, the ring of resonance grew warm against Harry's skin, golden light briefly connecting the two magical artifacts. "Curious," Dumbledore murmured, watching the interaction. "The stone appears to be resonating with your aura in a manner I wouldn't have predicted." Harry felt something stirring within his expanded magical awareness, a connection between the stone's alchemical transformative properties and something fundamental about the Omega Aura's nature. "Sir," he said slowly, following this intuitive understanding, "I think the aura and the stone represent opposite approaches to the same magical principle. The stone transforms physical matter through external application of alchemical formulas. The aura transforms magical essence through internal harmony with fundamental forces." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A profound insight, Harry. Nicholas himself took decades to articulate that particular relationship. So what does it mean that they're interacting now?" Hermione asked, her analytical mind clearly working through implications. "I believe," Dumbledore said thoughtfully, "it represents the culmination of the magical convergence we've been witnessing since the aura first manifested. Historical patterns suggest each Omega Aura manifestation leads to a fundamental transformation in wizarding society, a new paradigm of magical practice or organization." Harry stared at the stone, watching as golden light from his ring continued to interact with its ruby glow. "And this transformation has something to do with soul magic? With countering what Voldemort has done?" "Perhaps not merely countering, but transcending," Dumbledore suggested. "Voldemort's Horcruxes represent the darkest possible application of soul magic, fragmentation through murder. The Omega Aura may represent its opposite, integration through harmony." "Integration of what, exactly?" Ron asked, looking bewildered by the abstract magical theory. "Of magical approaches that have been artificially separated," Hermione suggested, her expression brightening with sudden understanding. "Think about it, we divide magic into rigid categories: transfiguration, charms, potions, defense. But Harry's experiences with the aura suggest those divisions are somewhat arbitrary. The underlying magical principles flow together naturally." Dumbledore beamed at her. "Excellently reasoned, Miss Granger. The wizarding world has indeed become increasingly compartmentalized in its approach to magic, a trend that accelerated particularly after the establishment of the Statute of Secrecy. When the last Omega Aura appeared, Harry noted, remembering their earlier conversation. Indeed. Each convergence represents magic's attempt to correct imbalances that have developed in wizarding practice. Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. Voldemort's Horcruxes may represent the ultimate expression of magical fragmentation, the literal shattering of magical wholeness. The Omega Aura's appearance could signify the beginning of a counter-movement toward reintegration. As if confirming his words, the Philosopher's Stone pulsed once more with ruby light, which briefly merged with the golden glow emanating from Harry's ring before both subsided to normal levels. The stone has served its purpose in catalyzing this understanding, Dumbledore said, carefully lifting the artifact from his desk. It must now be returned to Nicholas Flamel. He and Perenelle will need to make certain decisions regarding its future, given these developments. Will they be in danger without it? Harry asked, concerned. If they've been using the elixir of life, they have sufficient supply to set their affairs in order, Dumbledore assured him. And Nicholas has expressed increasing weariness with extended life. Recent events may provide the impetus for a transition they have been contemplating for some time. The conversation shifted to more immediate concerns, how the school would address Professor Quirrell's death, security enhancements to prevent similar incursions, and the ongoing development of Harry's abilities in light of these revelations. The connection you experienced with Voldemort's consciousness concerns me deeply, Dumbledore admitted. It suggests a magical link exists between you, perhaps created the night he gave you that scar, and now enhanced by the Omega Aura's awakening. Could he use that connection against Harry? Hermione asked worriedly. It's possible, Dumbledore acknowledged. Though the aura's natural protective properties provide significant shielding. Nevertheless, we should incorporate a clemency training into your special sessions, Harry, mental defenses to complement your magical ones. As the discussion continued, Harry found himself increasingly aware of the broader implications of everything they'd learned. The Omega Aura wasn't just an unusual magical talent or a historical curiosity, it represented magic's own response to a fundamental threat to magical balance, personified by Voldemort's horrific soul experimentation. Professor, he said finally, all of this seems much bigger than just me. The aura, the Horcruxes, the magical convergence. It's like I've been dropped into the middle of some vast magical conflict that's been building for centuries. Dumbledore's blue eyes regarded him with compassion. An apt description of your circumstances, Harry. Yet I would suggest that your presence at this nexus point is not random chance but magical purpose. The Omega Aura chose you specifically, not despite your youth and inexperience, but perhaps because of the particular qualities you embody. What qualities? Harry asked, genuinely puzzled. I'm just, me. Precisely, Dumbledore smiled. You approach magic with neither the rigid preconceptions of those raised in wizarding households nor the dismissive skepticism of those who encounter it later in life. You accept magical reality with an open heart while maintaining your essential self against external pressures to conform or submit. Ron and Hermione nodded in vigorous agreement, their expressions suggesting they'd recognized these qualities in Harry long before he'd seen them himself. The path ahead remains challenging, Dumbledore continued. Voldemort will not abandon his pursuits easily, particularly now that he's witnessed the Omega Aura's power directly. The Horcruxes must eventually be located and destroyed. And the magical convergence appears to be accelerating, bringing changes to wizarding society that may prove difficult for many to accept. But we'll face it together, Ron stated firmly. With proper research and preparation, Hermione added with determined practicality. Harry felt a surge of gratitude for his friend's unwavering support. The ring of resonance pulsed warmly in response to his emotion, briefly illuminating the three of them in a soft golden glow that seemed to affirm their connection. Magical friendship, Dumbledore observed with evident approval. Perhaps the most powerful force of integration we possess. As May gave way to June, news of the confrontation beneath Hogwarts spread throughout the wizarding world, though the official version released by the Ministry significantly downplayed both Voldemort's involvement and the Omega Aura's role in his defeat. To most of the wizarding public, the story became one of Dumbledore thwarting a former professor's attempt to steal a valuable magical artifact, dramatic but comfortingly conventional. Behind the scenes, however, significant changes were unfolding. The Department of Mysteries had increased its involvement in studying the magical convergence phenomenon, with Unspeakable Croaker making weekly visits to Hogwarts to document the Omega Aura's continuing evolution. The Board of Governors, shaken by Lucius Malfoy's connection to the possessed Quirrell, had temporarily suspended his chairmanship pending investigation. Most significantly, Dumbledore had initiated discreet communication with trusted members of the international magical community regarding the Horcrux threat and the broader implications of the magical convergence. Representatives from magical traditions outside the European paradigm had begun arriving at Hogwarts, bringing perspectives on integrated magical practice that had been preserved in traditions less influenced by ministry standardization. For Harry, the final weeks of his first year at Hogwarts became a whirlwind of specialized training, historical research with Hermione, and preparation for what Dumbledore delicately called the coming transition. The Omega Aura continued to evolve, becoming less a separate magical phenomenon and more an integrated aspect of his core magical identity, responsive to his intent without requiring conscious direction. The Ring of Resonance remained his primary tool for focusing the aura's capabilities, though he discovered that his father's invisibility cloak served a complementary function when used in conjunction with it. Together, the artifacts allowed him to perceive magical currents at unprecedented levels of detail, revealing connections between magical disciplines that had been obscured by artificial categorization. On the final evening before students would depart for summer holidays, Harry found himself in a special session with Dumbledore and an elderly Indian wizard named Arjun Patil, who had traveled from the ancient magical academy at Nalanda to observe the Omega Aura firsthand. Most fascinating, Master Patil commented, watching as Harry demonstrated the aura's ability to harmonize seemingly contradictory magical principles, combining transfiguration and charm work in ways conventional theory considered impossible. In our tradition, we call this Samyojana, the reunification of artificially separated magical currents. The separation occurred gradually over centuries, Dumbledore explained, as European magical practice became increasingly specialized and compartmentalized. To our detriment, Patil nodded. Magic in its natural state flows between these artificial categories like water between connected vessels. The barriers Western practice has erected create pressure points where magical energy becomes dangerously concentrated or depleted. Harry listened attentively, finding that Master Patil's perspective resonated with his own experiences. The Omega Aura naturally rejected the rigid categories of conventional magical education, flowing between disciplines according to underlying principles rather than surface distinctions. The convergence you're experiencing, Patil continued, addressing Harry directly, represents magic's own attempt to correct this imbalance, to restore natural flow between magical domains that have been artificially separated. Your Omega Aura serves as both catalyst and conduit for this restoration. But what does that mean practically? Harry asked. For the wizarding world, I mean. Significant change, Dumbledore answered candidly. Educational approaches will need to evolve. Regulatory frameworks designed around separated magical categories will require rethinking. And perhaps most challengingly, power structures built upon controlling access to specialized magical knowledge will face fundamental disruption. No wonder there's resistance, Harry observed, thinking of Lucius Malfoy's attempted interference and the Ministry's careful downplaying of the aura's significance. Change is always resisted by those who benefit from current arrangements, Patil agreed with a philosophical smile. Yet magic itself has chosen its moment and its vehicle. He nodded respectfully toward Harry. The convergence will proceed regardless of political preference. Their session continued late into the evening, with Master Patil sharing techniques for integrated magical practice that complemented Harry's intuitive approach with structured methodology. By the time they concluded, the castle had grown quiet, most students having retired to pack for tomorrow's departure. A moment before you return to Gryffindor Tower, Harry, Dumbledore requested as Master Patil bid them good night. Once they were alone in the headmaster's office, Dumbledore's expression grew more serious. I've arranged appropriate magical protections for you during the summer months. While your return to Privet Drive remains necessary to maintain certain fundamental safeguards, I've negotiated with your aunt and uncle for improved conditions. Harry nodded, grateful but resigned to the necessity of returning to the Dursleys. His enhanced magical perception had allowed him to understand the blood protection that Dumbledore had established through his mother's sacrifice, protections that required his periodic return to his aunt's home to remain viable. There is one more matter, Dumbledore continued, retrieving a small wooden box from his desk. In light of recent developments, I believe this belongs with you rather than in my safe keeping. He opened the box to reveal a small, triangular stone tablet covered in ancient runes, humming with magical energy that immediately resonated with the Omega Aura. This artifact was created by Godric Gryffindor during the founding of Hogwarts, Dumbledore explained. A record of his experiences as bearer of the Omega Aura, including techniques and insights he felt might benefit future bearers. Harry accepted the tablet carefully, feeling its magic harmonizing with his own. As he touched it, the runes briefly glowed with golden light, and he found he could somehow understand their meaning despite never having studied ancient runes. It's responding to the aura, he realized. Translating itself. Indeed, Dumbledore nodded. Gryffindor designed it specifically for future bearers. The knowledge it contains may prove invaluable as you continue to develop your abilities and confront the challenges ahead. As Harry prepared to leave, tablet carefully stowed in his bag alongside Gryffindor's ring and his father's cloak, Dumbledore offered one final observation. You've handled extraordinary circumstances with remarkable grace this year, Harry. From the unexpected awakening of the Omega Aura to direct confrontation with Voldemort, you've demonstrated qualities that validate magic's choice of you as bearer. I still don't feel particularly special, Harry admitted. Just, adaptable, I suppose. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Adaptability may be precisely the quality most needed for the transitions ahead. The magical world stands at a crossroads, Harry, between rigid adherence to increasingly dysfunctional separation and a return to more integrated, harmonious magical practice. Your journey with the Omega Aura will help determine which path prevails. The Hogwarts Express wound its way through the Scottish countryside, carrying students home after an extraordinary year. Harry sat with Ron and Hermione in a compartment near the back of the train, watching rural landscapes roll past while discussing summer plans. Mum's already invited you to stay with us, Ron was explaining. Dumbledore said it should be fine after you've spent a couple of weeks with the Muggles. And my parents said I could visit too, Hermione added. They're fascinated by everything I've told them about the Omega Aura and magical convergence. Dad's a science teacher, he keeps drawing parallels to paradigm shifts in scientific understanding. Harry smiled, grateful for their continued support. I'd like that. And maybe we can start researching those objects from my vision. The Horcruxes. The compartment door slid open, revealing Draco Malfoy standing alone, an unusual sight, as he typically traveled with Crabbe and Goyle as bodyguards. Potter, he said without his usual sneer. A word? Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione before nodding. Come in. Malfoy entered, closing the door behind him and remaining standing. His typically immaculate appearance showed signs of strain, shadows under his eyes, tension in his posture. I'll be direct, he said after a moment's hesitation. My father has been suspended from the Board of Governors pending investigation into his connections with recent events. I heard, Harry acknowledged neutrally. What you may not have heard is that certain objects in our family's possession are being scrutinized by ministry officials. Malfoy's expression betrayed genuine worry beneath his practiced composure. Including a diary my father has guarded most attentively. Harry felt a jolt of recognition. A diary that doesn't look quite ordinary. Magically speaking. Malfoy's eyes widened slightly. You know of it? I've seen it, Harry said carefully. In a vision during the confrontation with Quirrell. It's significant to Voldemort. Malfoy flinched at the name but didn't retreat. That aligns with certain suspicions I've developed. My family's alliance with the Dark Lord was more complex than is commonly understood. Why are you telling me this? Harry asked, genuinely curious about Malfoy's motivations. The Slytherin struggled visibly with his response. The magical acknowledgement I offered, it created certain resonances. I can sense, faintly, the direction of magical currents. His voice dropped lower. And I don't like where they're flowing regarding my family's future if current alignments persist. You're hedging your bets, Ron observed bluntly. I'm recognizing magical reality, Malfoy countered with a flash of his usual pride. Whatever else he may be, Potter has become a focal point for transformative magical forces. Only fools ignore such fundamental shifts. Harry studied Malfoy thoughtfully, the ring of resonance allowing him to perceive nuances in the Slytherin's magical signature, genuine concern beneath political calculation, and something like genuine respect buried beneath layers of inherited prejudice. If you have specific information about that diary, Harry said finally, or any similar objects, sharing it would demonstrate good faith. Malfoy hesitated, then made a decision. The diary responds to written input, writes back to anyone who pens entries in it. My father intimated it contains some essence of the Dark Lord from his school days. He planned to use it in some scheme involving Hogwarts next year. This aligned perfectly with Harry's vision. Thank you for telling me. This information is valuable. Something like relief flickered across Malfoy's face. My magical acknowledgement stands, Potter. Whatever comes next, remember that House Malfoy recognized the Omega Aura according to ancient protocols. After Malfoy departed, Ron shook his head in amazement. Bloody hell. Malfoy hedging against his own father's politics. Never thought I'd see the day. He's adapting, Hermione observed thoughtfully. Recognizing which way the magical winds are blowing, so to speak. Harry twisted the ring of resonance absently, considering the implications of Malfoy's warning. The diary is definitely one of the Horcruxes from my vision. If the Ministry is investigating Malfoy Manor, they might secure it before Voldemort can reclaim it. 1 down, 4 to go, Ron noted optimistically. It's a start, Harry agreed. Though finding the others won't be simple. Their conversation drifted to lighter topics as the journey continued: exam results, Hermione's perfect scores across all subjects, the Quidditch Cup, narrowly won by Slytherin, and plans for second-year courses. Despite these normal student concerns, Harry remained acutely aware of the extraordinary path that had opened before him. The Omega Aura had transformed his first year at Hogwarts in ways he could never have anticipated, placing him at the center of magical developments with historical significance. Yet amid these grand magical convergences and ancient prophecies, his greatest source of strength remained remarkably ordinary, the unwavering friendship of Ron and Hermione, who had stood beside him through every challenge. As the train approached London, Harry found himself contemplating Dumbledore's parting words about the crossroads facing the wizarding world. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with both promise and peril: Voldemort's return, the remaining Horcruxes, the accelerating magical convergence, and political resistance from those invested in maintaining magical separation. Yet for perhaps the first time since the Omega Aura had manifested during his sorting, Harry felt not just resigned to his role but increasingly aligned with it. The Aura had chosen him for reasons that were becoming clearer, not because he possessed extraordinary power or knowledge, but because he approached magic with an openness and integrity that resonated with its fundamental nature. The ring of resonance pulsed warmly against his finger as the train pulled into platform 9 3/4, a gentle reminder of the connection he now carried, not just to ancient magical forces, but to a future where magic might flow more harmoniously through artificial boundaries, integrated rather than fragmented. Whatever challenges that future held, Harry would face them not as the reluctant boy who lived, but as the willing bearer of the Omega Aura, guiding magical convergence toward healing rather than further division. And he would not face those challenges alone. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.